organized events specifically to celebrate Hitler's birthday on April 20th. These include Adolf Hitler celebrations and gatherings marked as family children into white supremacist ideology. In Germany, in Georgia, a Georgia neo-Nazi posted a photo on social media of a swastika-decorated birthday cake that his girlfriend gave him in honor of Hitler's birthday. And at the Federal Correctional Facility in Florence, Colorado, a Hitler birthday celebration among white supremacist inmates escalated into a race riot involving over 200 prisoners, resulting in deaths as well as injuries. And this year, the celebration of Hitler's 136th birthday may be a bigger deal than past years, because that's the day that Donald Trump gets the report that tells him whether or not he can declare a state of emergency and invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. On January 20th, when he became president, when he was sworn in, one of the very first, it may well have been the first, executive orders he signed that day tasked his Secretary of Defense, now Pete Hegseth, and his Secretary of HHS, now Kristi Noem, to collaborate and inform him on April 20th, what a perfect date, right, on Hitler's birthday, whether or not he could suspend the Constitution, which is exactly what Hitler got on March 27th? I'd have to go back and look, but it was 53 days into Hitler's chancellorship that he got the Enabling Acts passed, which was essentially the same thing. They said, you know, the president can violate the Constitution because it's a moment of national emergency. The national emergency that Hitler pointed to was economic. It was the Great Depression. The national emergency that Donald Trump is pointing to is immigrants coming across the southern border, which is, by the way, pretty much stopped. The German ambassador to the United States, who knows well the significance of Hitler's birthday, wrote about this danger in a confidential but leaked briefing document. He said, Donald Trump's agenda is one of maximum disruption, bringing about a constitutional order, maximum concentration of power with the president at the expense of Congress and the federal states. Basic democratic principles and checks and balances will be largely undermined. The legislature, law enforcement, and media will be robbed of their independence and misused as a political arm, and big tech will be given co-governing power. Now, he wrote this the week that Trump was sworn in for the German government and accurately predicted exactly what's going on. Of course, he's the German ambassador. I mean, you know, the guy has read history. So when you start seeing the institutions of a country bending to the will of its leader, you know that you are quite a ways down the authoritarian road. And we're seeing this, and other major law firms have buckled to Trump. Republicans in Congress are using the threat of impeachment to attack judges, the independence of federal judges. Major multiple media outlets have already rolled over and are paying Trump off. You know, you recall CBS gave him, or was it ABC, gave him $15 million. Multiple universities have caved into Trump's demands that he arrest and deport their foreign students. Most concerning, though, is what he has planned for Hitler's birthday, which is the day that he learns whether or not he'll have a document that will give a patina of legalism to his declaration. 420. Now, it may be that this is also the number for marijuana, but it appears to be a favorite of Elon Musk, just FYI. According to the Tesla website, April 20th is Elon Musk Day, a moment to celebrate the underappreciated genius. He once tweeted he was considering making Tesla private at $420. He acquired Twitter for $54.20 a share. He once tweeted, "I was born 69 days before 420." But this year is the date, excuse me, that Trump gets his orders. And would he violate the Constitution? Would he violate posse comitatus? Well, he's already imposing illegal tariffs. The Constitution is quite clear. It's in Article 1, I believe Section 7, that maybe Section 9, that says that only Congress can impose tariffs. Now, I realize in 1973, I think it was, 74, Congress passed a law saying that in a state of emergency, the president could declare a tariff, which is what he's using right now, but that's pretty thin gruel. Also, his deportations without due process are illegal under Trump taking millions from the Saudis for his live golf tournament the weekend at his shabby golf resort. That's an illegal violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. He doesn't care. His hustling Tesla cars in front of the White House, it's an illegal violation of the Hatch Act. He could go to prison for that. He doesn't care. His hatchet man Musk, his wholesale firing of government employees and shutting down agencies that were created by Congress, that's illegal. He doesn't care. So we're long past the moment when our first felon president slipped into his criminal. The question now is how far he's going to go once he gets his Hitler's birthday present in roughly 2 weeks.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air. So you can find my sources and you can. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Today is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence by Kristen Godsey. And this is from the introduction titled, You Might Be Suffering from Capitalism. The argument of this book can be summed up succinctly. Unregulated capitalism is bad for women. And if we adopt some ideas from socialism, women will have better lives. If done properly, socialism leads to economic independence, better labor conditions, better work-family balance, and yes, even better sex. Finding a way into a better future requires learning from the mistakes of the past, including a thoughtful assessment of the history of 20th century state socialism in Eastern Europe. That's it. If you like the idea of such outcomes, then come along for an exploration of how we might change things. If you're dubious because you don't understand why capitalism as an economic system is uniquely bad for women, and if you doubt that there could ever be anything good about socialism, this short treatise will provide some illumination. If you don't give a whit about women's lives because you're a gynophobic right-wing internet troll, save your money and go back to your parents' basement right now. This isn't the book for you. Of course, some might argue that unregulated capitalism sucks for almost everyone, but I want to focus on how capitalism disproportionately harms women. Competitive labor markets discriminate against those whose reproductive biology makes them primarily responsible for childbearing. Today, this means humans who get pink hats in the hospital and the letter F next to the name on the birth certificate, as if we've already failed by not coming into the world as a boy. Competitive labor markets also devalue those expected to be the primary caregivers of children. Although societal attitudes have evolved in this regard, our idealization of motherhood means that most of us still believe that baby needs mama, a whole lot more than papa, at least until the child is old enough to play sports. Others will argue that unregulated capitalism is not bad for all women. Yes, for those women lucky enough to sit at the top of the income distribution, the system works pretty well. Although women at the executive level still face gender pay gaps and remain underrepresented in leadership positions, on the whole, things aren't too shabby for the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world. Of course, sexual harassment still hinders progress, even for those at the top, and too many women believe that if you want to run with the big dogs, you may have to suck it up and ignore the groping and unwanted advances. And race plays an important role as well. White women do a lot better in aggregate than do women of color. But when we look at society as a whole, on average, women are comparatively worse off in countries where markets are less encumbered by regulation, taxation, and public enterprises than they are in nations where state revenues support greater levels of redistribution and larger social safety nets. Choose your data source, and you find the same story. Unemployment and poverty plague women with children. Employers discriminate against women without children because they might have them in the future. In the United States in 2013, women over the age of 65 suffered from poverty at much greater rates than men and dominated those in the category of extreme poverty. Globally, women face higher rates of economic deprivation. Women are often the last to be hired and the first to be fired in cyclical downturns. And when they do find employment, bosses pay them less than men. When states need to slash government spending on education, health care, or old age pensions, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives must pick up the slack, diverting their energy to care for the young, the sick, and the elderly. Capitalism thrives on women's unpaid labor in the home because women's care work supports lower taxes. Lower taxes mean higher profits for those already at the top of the income ladder, mostly men. But capitalism was not always so savage. Throughout much of the 20th century, state socialism presented an existential challenge to the worst excesses of the free market. The threat posed by Marxist ideologies forced Western governments to expand social safety nets to protect workers from the unpredictable but inevitable booms and busts of the capitalist economy. After the Berlin Wall fell, many celebrated the triumph of the West, consigning socialist ideas to the dustbin of history. But for all its faults, state socialism provided an important foil for capitalism. It was in response to a global discourse of social and economic rights, a discourse that appealed not only to the progressive populations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but also to many men and women in Europe and Western Europe and North America, that politicians agreed to improve working conditions for wage laborers, as well as to create social programs for children, the poor, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled, mitigating exploitation and the growth of income inequality. Although there were important antecedents in the 1980s, once state socialism collapsed, capitalism shook off the constraints of market regulation and income redistribution. Without the looming threat of a rival superpower, the last 30 years of global neoliberalism have witnessed a rapid shriveling of social programs that protect citizens from stability and financial crises and reduce the vast inequality of economic outcomes between those at the top and those at the bottom of the income distribution. For much of the 20th century, Western capitalist countries also endeavored to outdo the East European countries in terms of women's rights, fueling progressive social change. For example, the state socialists in the USSR and Eastern Europe were so successful at giving women economic opportunities outside the home that initially, for the 2 decades after the end of World War II, women's wage work was conflated with the evils of communism. The American way of life meant male breadwinners and female homemakers. But slow championing of women's emancipation began to chip away at the lead.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, top of the morning to you, afternoon, wherever it is, whatever you are. Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, TGIF. It is the end of the week. It's the beginning of the weekend, and we've got a lot to talk about today. But the first hour of our program, which will start in just a moment, will be Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. What's on your mind? The number is 202-808-9925. In the second hour of our program, my op-ed today, From Epstein's Island to Obama's Inbox, Trump's Dark Diversion Strategy. Also, this amazing new psychological study finding that the majority of Trump-supporting Republicans are, shall we say, psychopaths? I'll tell you about that in the second hour. Also, will the world look away as Gazans are being starved to death and driven out of Gaza? Is the plan for Gaza to become part of Greater Israel? Is that the position of the Trump administration? We'll talk about that in the second hour. And L.A. grand juries are refusing to indict ICE protesters. This is fascinating stuff, also in the second hour. In the third hour of our program, the shocking Epstein-Dershowitz timeline. And why does Alan Dershowitz keep writing op-eds calling for lowering the age of consent to 15? And why is the DOJ talking to a convicted pedophile instead of the victims? Interesting stuff. And also in the third hour, the FCC's approval of the Paramount Skydance merger reeks of the worst forms of corruption. Are we surprised? Where is this going to go? And what happens if the Ellison family also buys TikTok, which is in the news today as a rumor at the moment? So a lot to talk about today. But to start off, Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. It's our Middays with Mark segment, only this time on a Friday instead of a Wednesday. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's a current member and the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's the co-founder and co-chair of the Labor Caucus and chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus. Pocan.house.gov is his website, and that's also his Blue Sky handle, Pocan.house.gov. Congressman, welcome back to the program. I'm wondering what's on the top of your mind today. Congress is out, right? They cut and ran.
Is going to go down in history books for being the most pathetic Congress that I can remember in my adult lifetime of following Congress. The Republicans are in the majority and they can't even get bills on the calendar because they can't perform even the most basic functions. They got the big ugly law now done because that was Trump, forcing them to get that done. But now Jeffrey Epstein, just the idea of releasing the Epstein files has got them so tied up that they had enough members on the Rules Committee refuse to schedule any meaningful bills. So all we did were, suspension bills, which are going to pass, often, with like the exception of 5 or 10 people in Congress. And they sent us home because they can't even govern while they're in the majority. So, I guess maybe that's good at some level, although we do have a date coming up where if we don't have a budget done by September 30th, we do have the potential of shutting down the government. But it's just at its rock bottom of performance without question right now.
What's the significance of the federal police subcommittee, correct me if I've got the name wrong, of the Rules Committee, I believe it was, or the Oversight Committee, rather, voting not unanimously, it was 8-2, voting 8-2 to demand that the Epstein documents in the possession of the FBI be given to, on a confidential basis, I understand, to members of Congress for their evaluation. Do I have that right? And what does that mean?
Yeah, so I was in appropriation markups most of the week. We're still finishing that process. But what it means is at least there's a few Republicans admitting that we need to release the Epstein files, regardless of Donald Trump saying there's nothing to look at here, after saying everything is about the Epstein files prior to that, right? So we know, again, the smell test, it doesn't pass the smell test right now, what Donald Trump is saying. And there's many people in the MAGA movement who've been promised there's so much information about the elites in here that they want it released. And now suddenly they're told to look the other way. So it did say that some Republicans, and we could tell by every other function, the fact that they had to send us home early, the same thing. Whether or not it's going to immediately happen, it won't, very likely. I mean, it's a positive sign, but it's not what we need. What we need is to have Congress, to make this full push. And Mike Johnson, not to, just be carrying the water of the president rather than, what people really want. But if we can't even function because they're afraid to vote on an amendment that asks, Congress-wide to vote to release the files, that's so risky either to their relationship with Donald Trump or their relationship to the base that we can't do anything. It just shows the unbelievably pathetic position we're in right now as a Congress.
What do you think about the theory that this is the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency? Or do you think that, their strategy of shutting down Congress for August, I've been doing this show for 23 years. I can tell you from experience that during the month of August, I mean, we just throw it open. Typically, we call it anything goes summer, so people can call on any topic, because our call volume drops substantially in August. And that's because listenership is down, and every news network sees this. People just disengage. They're going on vacation, frankly. Right. So is it possible that the Epstein thing will have gone away in September?
Well, and that's the worry, right? I mean, what else are they going to do? Right now, they're releasing things that aren't the files, trying to act like it's something. There's the possibility of a pardon, which would be potentially highly political motivated, and that would be something we've got to watch. My biggest fear, honestly, Tom, is, we lost the election because of global inflation and the economy, because, 12 different countries that were like us, whoever was in charge got thrown out. And that's what happened. 50% of the people in exit polls said they voted the economy. The number one reason Donald Trump's not doing well in the polls is because of the economy. He's done nothing to lower the cost like he's promised. People vote their pocketbooks, and the bill they just passed is going to hurt them. They're going to pay more on energy costs. They're going to pay more for healthcare costs. People are going to lose healthcare and education funding. There's many bad things about this bill. And whenever we're not talking about it, because it's unbalanced 20 points by any poll that you see on it, those are the things that people vote on, I think, the strongest. So this is an issue that's very important to the MAGA base. But I can tell you by the calls I got this week to my office that weren't organized campaign calls were relatively limited. But I think among the MAGA base, this is very, very significant. So is it a tool in the tool shed of trying to expose Donald Trump? Yes. Is it how we necessarily win the 2026 election going forward? I really do think it's people's pocketbook issues. It's what they talk about at the kitchen table. And I hope that this doesn't distract us from over the next 5 weeks. I'm going next week back to the 3rd Congressional District, to Derek Van Orden's district, to do a town hall.
Hey, good on you.
In the town he lives in. In the town he lives in, because he hasn't shown up. I'm making it as easy as possible because people need to know how much their pocket has been picked to give Donald Trump and Elon Musk and others a tax break and what they're going to lose along the way for it. And for me, I'm an economic populist, progressive. I want to make sure we're getting it across because I think that's how people really what they care about the most. And I hope we don't lose focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So if Epstein goes away in the fall, it might actually be a blessing, weirdly.
Yeah, I mean, this law is awful. What they have done is the worst thing I've seen in 30 years of being in politics, in government. And if we don't make sure everyone knows about how bad this is, and whenever people know about it, they hate it.
Yeah.
They don't know about it. And that's
we got a big messaging job here.
Exactly.
It's just about 15 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Up next, your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan, the Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. It's Middays with Mark, Friday edition. We'll be... And welcome back. Scott in Oakland, California. You are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. And Representative Pocan, appreciate talking to you. The one thing that came to mind hearing about Todd Blanche going down to Florida to privately meet with Ghislaine Maxwell, get some sort of, I don't know what, a readout from her, what she knows, whatever. That would be I would imagine that would be a prime foreign intelligence target to eavesdrop on that communication. So I would wonder if there was any kind of security set up for that, put in a skiff, something. This would be something that to challenge them on. Because if I was a foreign intelligence agency, I certainly would want to know what Donald Trump was accused of by Ghislaine Maxwell. Not only that, but is that a private prison? So if that was a private prison like GEO, where they're holding a lot of the immigrant detainees, if GEO had that kind of blackmail material on Donald Trump, my God.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to know what questions were asked because my guess is that they were predicated.
Yeah, that would be important.
So let's get the congressman's thoughts on this.
Yeah, Scott, I don't know if it's a private prison, but you raise a really excellent point, right? I mean, this is something that's so volatile for Donald Trump. I've never seen him try to, back paddle so desperately on anything that he started this whole Jeffrey Epstein issue, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it. And now he's trying to back away from it so quickly. Clearly where there's smoke, there's fire. And we know now, according to the Wall Street Journal, that he was told his name's in there. And then, of course, it all makes sense. There's so many photos out there. But if you actually knew what questions were asked and what the answers were, that could be extremely valuable to try to manipulate this president and to force him to do things. So excellent point you bring up, Scott, but I don't know if it was a private prison.
Rob in Milpitas, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We have about a minute here until the break.
First off, I'd like to suggest using the phrase Republican regime. And in particular, I want to talk about the Republican regime withholding money from states and programs. For example, we've got a BART subway project here in the South Bay of California where we need $5 billion from the feds, and Ro Khanna said it was an uphill battle, which I think is a euphemism for it's not going to be coming this way. But according to the South Bay Progressive Alliance, there may be an alternative technology that could cost far less, and it's called personal rapid transit.
So what's your question for the Congressman, Rob?
As the former Department of Transportation Secretary, think about automated transit networks and specifically pod car technology.
It broke up a little bit, but the biggest problem we have right now and I'm probably not answering it directly because I couldn't hear it, Tom, but for September 30th, the end of our fiscal year, what would stop a shutdown is we have to agree probably on a continuing resolution. But how do you trust people doing what he just said, where they're stealing funds that Congress has authorized? Yeah. And that is a huge problem.
Yeah. His question was, do you know anything about pod car technology?
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't either. But, I know Elon Musk has solutions for mass transit, too, that seem a little out. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour taking your calls. It's Middays with Mark, Friday edition. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in 60 seconds. I've got to read a commercial over on the commercial side. You'll hear a promo here, and we'll be right back with Congressman Pocan. Stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. It's the shocking truth about hairdryer economics and climate change. Donald Trump recently came out with this just absolutely absurd statement. He said, they want everybody to have an electric car. We don't have enough electricity. We couldn't make enough electricity for that. Well, let's just look at the facts. Charging your electric car with the charger that typically comes with it, you plug it into a 110-volt outlet, pulls about 10 amps. That's about the same as a hairdryer. So if everybody in America just ran a hairdryer for a couple hours every night, or anytime during the day, do you think that that's going to bring down the power grid? No, this is absurd. It's also why it only costs, running an electric car, powering an electric car is about the equivalent of $1 a gallon gasoline. Obviously it depends on the car. But there's a whole great rant with all the details and charts and graphs and everything else. It's over at HartmannReport.com. It's called The Shocking Point About Hairdryer Economics and Climate Change. Check it out.
Whispers in the halls of power.
Is with us for the hour, taking your calls. And Susan in Caldwell, Idaho, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Congressman. Good morning, Tom.
Hey.
Congressman, I have so many topics, but I just want to narrow one down to press freedom in this country. There's a case coming out of Georgia where an independent journalist was picked up in Atlanta on No King's Day on June 14th on what looked like trumped-up charges. He wasn't in Fulton County, where Greater Atlanta is. He was picked up by police in DeKalb, and we all know what surrounds our blue cities. Anyway, as soon as the district attorney for the DeKalb County said there was nothing here, the guy, there was no evidence. Even AP had a picture of him standing by himself and then being approached by police. Another surrounding county had already teed up, the sheriff had teed up charges they were going to pick him up with. And in all of this, ICE had put a hold on the man. He's a El Salvadoran immigrant who apparently is here on a work visa, according to his attorneys. Anyway, he's being held by ICE. It's become a real issue with press freedom groups. His name is Mario Guevara. I don't know if you're aware of his case, but please look it up so you can learn about it. It seems all trumped up, and it's an effort to silence an independent journalist whose topic has been immigration issues in the greater Atlanta and Georgia area.
Great.
For 20 years.
Let's get Congressman's thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, thanks for flagging, Susan. So, at two fronts. One, there's definitely attacks on the press. He's going to sue the Wall Street Journal for putting out stories. Honestly, I can't wait for the disclosure on that. So let's go to discovery. Let's have that trial. I think Donald Trump may have second thoughts about what he's done there. But they are going after the press, and watching what CBS, Paramount, and done and paying things off is just disgusting. And that's one issue. But the second issue, Donald Trump, we were pretty lopsided on talking about the border because people do think that we're somehow not saying we want to have secure borders. We do, but it didn't, that what Democrats are saying. but the polls are turning against him because of things like this, because they're abusing the very powers that they have. And I think, Donald Trump's got to be careful. He's got a lot of attacks on passed a bill that's absolutely awful for the average working person, and his polling is at the lowest modern president for where he's at right now in his term. There's a lot of things that Donald Trump he's doing that are brutal and wrong, and we're all very pissed for good reason, but he's also overreaching, and this may be, Tom, the broader attacks he's doing would catch up with him in the short term.
Yeah, one hopes. Michael in Chicago. Michael, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
I'm concerned about the fact of winning the next election, 2026. And I'm concerned about the fact that we got to get 17-year-old kids who are legally eligible to vote in the primary elections in 27 states now. 27 states they could vote in the primary if they become 18 by the general election. I'm in Illinois. We got in Illinois, it's in Indiana, in Ohio, in Kentucky, North and South Carolina. We got this. And my question will be now, I know Mr. O'Connor is working at the federal level, but can he do something in Wisconsin? Wisconsin does not have 17-year-old kids voting in primaries. If they pass a law in a legislature, you can get it done, but is it possible that could be done? Because we got to get these 17-year-old kids all across the country voting. A lot of people don't even know that 17-year-olds can vote in primaries. They think you got to be 18 to vote in any kind of election.
Michael. Thank you.
Michael, no, I mean, it's a good point. I didn't actually realize it was that many states, and that's great to hear. The problem that we're going to have nationally is, Mike Johnson's never going to move that forward, I think, in Congress. In Wisconsin, we have a Republican legislature, and while we just got rid of gerrymandered maps 2 years ago, we didn't quite get the majorities until next year. I do think they have a good chance. There's only 5 seats. We need 2 in the state Senate. It's very doable. And then we could move something like that forward. But, Republicans generally on voting, as you know, are just completely awful. They really don't want it to be more inclusive. So that's the difficulty we have at the federal level, the difficulty we would have in Wisconsin. Despite having a Democratic governor, our legislature still, the majority is under the Republicans.
Kent in Humboldt, Iowa. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, good morning, Tom and Congressman Pocan. I had a question about our listeners be interested to know about FCC and the president's power to control mergers. Always been this heavy-handed, or what's the situation now? And also, Congressman Pocan, if you ever want to come to Iowa, we'd be glad to have you, because we have absolutely no representation right now in Congress, as you well know. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kent.
Well, thank you, Kent. And, I usually around election time, I do try to get through some of the congressional districts in Iowa, and we have made an offer to do a town hall in one of the districts. So maybe we will see you, because I'm more than glad to go down the road. I only live about an hour and 15 minutes from Iowa, where I'm at in Wisconsin. I think, Donald Trump, the problem is he's a thug, and that's the polite term for him. I've got a few others that you'd get in trouble if I said, Tom, on the radio. But what he's doing are like making these media entities and anyone who wants to do mergers think that he does have that power, because he will manipulate the people he's appointed. This is the first time I've ever seen someone, when president, not get people for their expertise in cabinet posts or other positions like the FTC and others, but he is actually asking people for their video. He wants them, 1, to be loyal to him, and 2, look good on TV when they're talking. And that's all he cares about. So you don't necessarily have the expertise. So all these media companies that are following, I mean, I'll tell you, CBS, I've lost enormous respect for.
It's going to be a big problem. It's going to be a big problem. We'll be right back. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program, 808-9925.
We'll be right back with more of your calls for the Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Congressman Mark Pocan. Stay with us. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Decadent Society, How We Became the Victims of Our Own Success by Russ Douthat, a New York Times columnist. And this is from, it's about the middle of his first chapter. This is a subchapter titled The Limits of Neoliberalism. There's no shortage of theories to explain this great stagnation, to borrow a phrase from one of the theorizers, the George Mason University economist Tyler Cowen. And there's also no need to simply choose between them. Like most broad trends, the economic decadence of the developed world is overdetermined, and almost every serious attempt at explanation will contain some element of truth. The most politically theories, the ones animating populist and liberalism itself, claiming that the medicine for 1970s stagflation has proven to be poisonous in large doses. The push for ever freer trade has hollowed out Western economies, the argument goes, offshoring productive industries and killing decent jobs, making financiers and knowledge workers rich while the middle class shrinks steadily. Meanwhile, low tax rates intended to spur investment have enabled the rich to keep more of their gains while starving the programs required to protect the poor and boost the working classes. Antitrust policy on the so-called benefits of consolidation, lower prices for consumers, that it has ignored all the ways that market-dominant corporations can warp policies and strangle innovation. And anti-inflationary policies, forged to counteract a crisis that's now generations behind us, have been adopted as a dogma that's now by the West's financial and political elite, which demands fiscal austerity under every circumstance and deprives struggling economies of the cash they need to grow. You don't have to accept every aspect of this argument, and indeed the populists of the left and right disagree about which aspects to stress, to see that it describes a real phenomenon, perhaps not the out of neoliberalism, but diminishing returns from some of its preferred policies, and an overconfidence among the Western leadership class that solutions from the 1970s are permanently applicable. On trade, for instance, the general principle that markets have more winners than losers led policymakers to assume that this would necessarily happen and to overestimate how quick it would recover and how the economy could compensate. In particular, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology economist David Autor has argued persuasively that the China shock, the dramatic offshoring that followed Beijing's entrance into the World Trade Organization in 2001, inflicted more economic damage on working-class communities in the United States than many experts anticipated, without generating the compensating growth and job creation expected elsewhere. This is not a knockdown case against free trade, just a case against overconfidence in its incautious application. Growth and innovation when tax rates are cut from 70% highs, but also that a program of permanent upper bracket tax cutting, as practiced by America's Republican Party, won't produce the hoped-for spillover effects among the bottom 95%. It's possible that the initial economic insight that some corporate consolidation could be good for consumers was useful for antitrust decision-making in the 1970s and 80s, but needs to be corrected as monopolies regather. It's possible that a program of deficit reduction and tight money that makes sense when inflation is galloping doesn't make sense when we're closer to deflation. The countries sometimes need a loose monetary policy to fight stagnation, and having a financial overclass too fixated on the perils of a for now imaginary inflation is a recipe for permanently lower growth. An overextended, subtle argument pushed by the more serious sort. I think I skipped a page here. Sort of liberalism that the neoliberal program hasn't so much pushed too far, pushed in the wrong direction. In this argument, we don't need less deregulation, but a different kind than we have, because incumbents and insiders in the West have captured the sprawling regulatory state and used it to freeze out potential competition. The age of stagnation, according to this theory, is the fruit of what Brink Lindsay of the Henson Institute and Stephen Tellez of Johns Hopkins University describe as a captured economy, in which everything from land use rules to exclusionary zoning to occupational licensing to intellectual property protections to corporate subsidies and tax breaks all converge to create a system basically the worst of socialism and the worst of capitalism conjoined. Plutocratic and sclerotic, overregulated and undertaxed, with an class enriching itself off rents rather than innovation, and a service class that can't advance beyond its station. The overlap between this more libertarian argument and the left-wing critique of neoliberalism is apparent in one of the texts of the post-financial crisis left, French economist Thomas Piketty's 2013 tome, Capital, the 21st Century, which mined centuries worth of statistics to argue that capitalism inherently makes the rich richer because returns on capital will always be higher than simple economic growth unless some powerful force. The forces that intervened in the 20th century were the Great Depression and 2 world wars, which not only provided the impetus for government interventions, but destroyed outright a great deal of capitalist wealth. The book is The Decadent Society by Russ Douthat.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. Gabe in Pacerville, California. You're on the air.
Hey, Tom. It's actually Placerville, but
okay.
I can live in Pacerville.
Okay, you got it.
Placerville. Hi, Representative Pocan. How you doing? I had a question for you. I was wondering what you can tell me to register as a Democrat. I am currently registered as an independent. I haven't always been an independent. When I first registered and started voting, which was about 30 years ago, I registered as a Green, and I'd been a Green all the way up until 2016 when I changed party affiliation to vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary here in California. I later changed it back to being a Green after the election, and then went back to being a Democrat in 2020 to vote for Bernie again. And now I switched over to being an independent. Like I said, what can you tell me to change back to being a Democrat? You know, frankly, like I'm very skeptical and of the party these days, and just like many people are, and many people just see the Democrats in total disarray and being.
But get inside it and make some changes, Gabe. Let's let Congressman Pocan respond to your question.
Yeah, Gabe, I'll give you one really strong one. If you're a progressive like myself, you want to pick the most progressive Democrat to be the Democratic nominee. You're not a Democrat in a state that makes you register by party. You can't vote for that most progressive person to win the primary to be the nominee. And as an independent, you're not voting in those primaries. So you're not actually, where often primary is likely to be the nominee and maybe be the next member of Congress, member of the legislature, whatever. You're just not participating by not being two major parties in a country where it is a two-party system. So that reason alone, I'd like people to be able to vote for the most progressive person in a primary and the way being registered as a Democrat.
Kino, happy Frias Day. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, happy Frias Day, the goddess of love in Norway, in case other people don't know that, from which Friday was named. But my question to Congressman Pocan, I a letter last week to Democratic Party Chairman Ken Martin, I think his name is, and I sent a copy to you, Congressman, and several other people in Congress. I don't know if you still get letters. People send in emails all the time. But I asked the congressman Tom has invited him to come on his program, and he hasn't responded. And would you please lobby him to come on Tom's program? And also, would you join me in lobbying him to recruit Tom and Robert Reich to craft messages for the Democratic Party? Tom is very articulate, and Robert Reich on Free Speech TV, they're wonderful spokespersons for the ideals of progressive Democrats. So would you join me in lobbying him to come on Tom's program and also to recruit Tom and Robert Reich to be spokespersons and craft messages for the Democratic Party?
Got it. Thank you, Keno. The check is in the mail.
Yeah. Well, absolutely, he should be going on the #1 rated progressive nationwide radio program, right? I mean, it would be completely illogical for the head of the DNC not to do that. Hopefully, that's sufficient reason, and it shouldn't take more for that. For a very common reason. Just so people know, when you write a letter to a member of Congress, if I can, Tom, a quick aside, it does have to get screened for things like ricin and stuff, and not get it for 3 or 4 weeks. So if you are trying to get a hold of someone in a more timely way, email or a phone call, because we'll get it instantly, but not saying don't use mail, because, I want to support the Postal Service, and it's still a way many people communicate. Just know, for a member of Congress, if you send it to their Washington office as opposed to maybe a local office, it will get there a lot longer.
Postcards get through faster, though, don't they?
They still have to be screened, though, if a DC office. So sometimes there's incentive to send to local offices.
Yeah. Ken.
Yeah, hey, Congressman, really appreciate what you do, but I have a disagreement with you about voter caging. While it's true that inflation due to COVID caused a lot of people to swing right, it is two things can be true, and it is also true that the legitimate voters that were legally purged from voting rolls cost Kamala Harris the election.
4.2
That's by
million.
the government's own figures. She would have won by 1 million votes. So my point is, this is really scary times we're living in. It's well past time to start fighting fire with fire. And it's time to use every legal method we can. And the Supreme Court has said that voter caging is legal. Wisconsin used to be a solid blue state. You ought to know how long and how much damage is caused when they take over these states. So my point is, it's time for the Democratic Party to start voter caging in blue states just as much as they are doing in red states, and to also to gerrymander as much as the Republican Party is gerrymandering. Because I got to tell you, as a voter, for you guys not to be doing this at this point in time in our history, everything that's going on, it's insulting to me, but it's especially insulting to black and brown voters, because they are the majority of people getting purged. I'll listen for your comments.
Yeah, Ed, I don't actually think we're in disagreement. I'm just saying I know from the polls that happened and the polls right now that are hurting Trump that the economy is the factor. So I want to make sure that we're keeping our focus on what the average voter that we need to get their vote is keeping on focus. But I agree with you. Like right now, what they're trying to do on gerrymandering in Texas and Missouri and other states, we may have to fight back in California and New Jersey and some other places, because they are going to break the rules. And as much as I don't want to go down that road personally, we have to, though, in many of these cases. So I don't think we necessarily disagree. I'm just saying at the end of the day, how someone actually votes in that last election and what right now is taking Donald Trump down in the polls is the economy. And every day that I don't talk about the 17 million people losing health care, the millions of people losing food assistance, the people losing education funding, the fact that you're going to pay more for utilities because they did in the big ugly law, and you're going to pay more for health care because of what they did. I'm not doing my job, and I'm going to keep doing that.
Just to clarify Ed's question, caging is something that the Republican Party started doing in the 60s when they rolled out Operation Eagle Eye. And it's where they mail a postcard. It's a phrase that comes out of the direct mail industry. And it's where they mail a postcard into targeted neighborhoods, largely black neighborhoods. And the postcard looks like junk mail. And the postcard says, if you fail to return this within a particular period of time, we will remove you from the voting rolls because we'll assume that you've moved. And for over 30 years, the GOP had a restraining order, a nationwide restraining order against them for caging. Karl Rove was running caging operations in the 90s. And finally, in 2018, in the Husted case, the U.S. Supreme Court, or 5 Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court, ruled that caging was okay now. It's perfectly legal. And so Greg Palast ran the numbers using federal voter data and found that 4.2 million people had been purged from voting rolls in the months leading up to the 2024 election. And had those people not been purged, Kamala Harris would have won, and Democrats would now control both the House and Senate. I mean, he has it state by state. He's got all the statistics, and he'd be happy to share them with you, I'm sure. And so the question is, right now, in Ohio, they're sending Cincinnati and Cleveland. In Texas, they're sending them into Houston and Dallas. In Florida, they're sending them into the big cities. They are caging, in red states, their blue cities. And in the blue states, nobody is doing caging because the Democratic Party's position has been this is immoral, it's wrong, and nobody should ever do it, so we're not going to do it either. So that's what he was about when he's talking about caging.
Yeah, and I knew that because a previous caller, another time I was on the program, we had this conversation, and I said, I don't want to go down that path. I have put an asterisk on that because of what they're doing right now with gerrymandering, right? That's why if they're going to do it in Texas, we should do it in California. Is that the preferred way? Absolutely not. Do that simply doing nothing. I personally do caging, but I certainly understand why people may look at it. If the Republicans do it in a more organized fashion, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that if the Democrats started caging Republican strongholds, in California, go after the part of Orange County that's still bright red, the Republicans will start yelling and screaming, and that might provoke a national conversation, which might provoke a law against caging, which would be, ultimately all of our goals. So anyway, sorry to go off down that rabbit hole.
No. I remember the previous call, and I know Ed remembers my answer to the previous call by how he asked it. And like I said, I have moved, watching this redistricting stuff, really, to go into Missouri to try to squeeze. They only have 2 Democrats in the state of Missouri. They want to squeeze one more out. Like, this is stuff that, if that's the only way you can hold power, then if we don't do anything, then it's our own fault.
Yeah, I'm with you. It is, and I'd love to see the Republicans squealing. It is just about 45 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan, Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls, Middays with Mark.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Middays with Mark, Friday edition. Picking up your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Holly in Washington, D.C., you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello. Congressman Pocan, I was really happy to see you on Lake Lawrence and Rachel recently. Your voice is so important. So I was excited about that. But my question is, there was a bill that was called the Link Act, which, as I recall, had some kind of provision that you could just assume somebody was guilty, and then you could confiscate them or whatever it was, and that there were some Democrats that voted for that, and there was a lot of hoopla. Did that ever get signed into law? What happened with that?
Yeah, I'm actually looking it up as we talk because we passed it in the House, and it said officially named S5. I'm trying to find out what the Senate did with it, but it was one of their messaging bills, but that totally violated due process. And it's great for them to say, oh, look, you want criminals not to be deported. No, I mean, you can deport criminals right now, but what they were going to do is call people criminals who weren't even criminals. And they had a couple bills at the time. So I don't want to tell you the specifics because I might have the wrong on which bill, but it was a package of bills. The good news is that, and I shouldn't say good news, maybe is the wrong word, but the positive news is that they're so overreaching in this area, Tom, that they're starting to, where they had a huge advantage on messaging on the border because people didn't really think we wanted to protect the border like we do, that now they're backfiring because they want to get rid of everyone's due process rights, and they're going after and abducting these people. And when you start to see the video of what they're doing and the way ICE is is anonymous and all the rest, they're overreaching. And, this law was certainly one of the first ones they put forward in the House anyway on this. But, the good news is, again, the American people are a lot smarter than Republicans think they are, and they don't want our country to look like an authoritarian state like Donald Trump.
North Dakota, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan, and we have about a minute here before we hit a break.
Okay, I'll get on with it here. Wall Street price gouging. The numbers on Wall Street have climbed and climbed and climbed since the COVID. I'm reading Bloomberg, Forbes, and et cetera, where these shareholders, major shareholders, are demanding profit. And we see the price gouging like it is right now. We don't have exports of beef into this country anymore. Last thing up in Canada there, but we've watched our calf, this Angus Pride and JBS come in here and literally just skin us as far as the cost of food or meat like that. Now, one other thing I'd like to make
your question,
on this
Mike,
Epstein
what's your
file
question
is,
for the congressman? I only have 20 seconds.
why are the numbers climbing so high since 2008 after the bubble broke? And it was 13,000 when the bubble broke. Why is it 44,000 in just a period of 20 years?
The Dow. That's a great question. Congressman?
Yeah. I don't know if I have an answer for you, Mike, specifically on that. I thought where you were going was in an area that, we don't have regulation anymore over these mergers like we did under Joe Biden and Lena Khan. We actually were doing something. And right now, they're going to start allowing these mega mergers again, and it's really bad for consumers. So, but I don't have a direct answer to the Dow question.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a monopoly association. There's half as many companies that are publicly listed now as there were when Reagan came into office. Huh? It causes you to scratch your head, but who knows?
And Lena Khan did an amazing job.
She really did. She really did. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. Pocan.house.gov is his website and his Blue Sky handle. We'll be right back with more of your calls for the former chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. Kept jobs in the century that America was built on tariffs. It's one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected in 2016 was because he talked about tariffs. But for some reason right now, the Harris-Walz campaign, or Democrats in general, are reluctant to talk about tariffs. They call them sales taxes or something like that. They really need to be a little more straightforward because people, particularly in the industrial Midwest, or in the Rust Belt, as we call it now, are not dumb. They know what's going on. They know where we've been and how we got here. And I think it's pretty important to be talking about tariffs and what they are, how they work, and how they can bring manufacturing back home. I wrote a piece about Hartmann Report. It's titled "Why is Wrong and Alexander Hamilton Was Right About Tariffs." And I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating at hartmannreport.com. Check it out.
There is a house in Washington.
And welcome for Pocan with us, taking your calls for the hour. In Enfield, Connecticut. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello. I have a simple question, and I wonder why Democrats never seem to do this. Can a democratically controlled Congress reverse most or all of Trump's executive orders, and especially the so-called permanent tax cut? In other words, I believe there's no such thing as a permanent tax cut. Can't Democrats reverse all of this?
Simple answer, yes. But better answer, not necessarily, because what they did, like with the reconciliation process, just a simple majority, there's around it. Anything else that you do as a simple appeal something would take the 60 votes in the Senate, right? So that's part of the problem we've had with the filibuster rules. And in some, it would take the president signing a law into place in some other ways to try to repeal things. And even if you had the Democrats in control, if you still have Donald Trump as president, then that could stop some things. So yes, theoretically, absolutely, but the practical application is probably more difficult, Harold.
Judy in Denver, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Congressman, silence shows complete support, and only about half the population of the U.S. has the Internet. Now, the GHF has been killing Palestinians every single day. France 24 says approximately 119 Palestinians are killed every single day for about the last month. Now, our tax dollars are funding the GHF. It has to go. This slaughter has to go. The starvation of the Palestinian people is just horrifying.
You're talking, Judy, the GHF you're talking about is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this group that the Israelis and the Americans put together to feed people?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And that's where the people are getting shot. So what's your question?
And they're being bombed every day along
right, so what's
with
your question?
Why are the Democrats completely silent on this? This massive slaughter has got to stop, and Netanyahu wants to kill every single Palestinian. He broke the last ceasefire and all ceasefires they've ever made.
Okay, so why are Democrats silent on this, Congressman?
Yeah, and so, Judy, the only thing I'll give you is I think Democrats the entity of Democrats is too silent on this, but there are plenty of Democrats talking about this. I would say, Judy, right now, go to my social media at Mark Pocan on Twitter, Blue Sky, and look at how many times I talk about how barbaric what's happening right now under Netanyahu's Israel is, and the fact you're shooting people who are simply going to get food and people dying of starvation, and it is Netanyahu that's doing this. And I'm not the only one. I'm not going to pose for any holy pictures here. There's plenty of Democrats saying that. So I really find it a bit frustrating when people want to just say, oh yeah, yes, Democrats collectively should be much more outspoken, including in Palestine, and they don't do it enough. But there are many members and a growing number of members pushing on this, and it is absolutely awful what's happening. But honestly, Judy, broaden your spectrum of what you're looking at, because there are people, and then help us amplify that message. And that's part of how we get change in this country.
Brilliant. Ed in Kingston, Michigan. Ed, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, man. My question is, Vice News has had, for the last several weeks, some very important about the real bad gangs that exist in California as well as all around the country. And, of course, the Marines are there, but they won't touch those guys. They're all tattooed and all that. Vice News has had several programs on that. And why are they going after the laborers and the farm workers rather than the real bad gangs that exist there in California as well as elsewhere? Thank you very much.
Yeah, Ed, I haven't seen the Vice News stories, so I can't speak specifically to those. But, one Trump argument is honestly BS, that there's all these criminals who are here. And so when they're trying to say they're going to deport all the folks, there's just not enough criminals. And don't forget, they do want to keep some of the myth of what he's saying out there so that people are afraid, because then you go to the cult leader because only he can solve problems for you. So, you're right, though. They are deporting people who do not meet the definition they promised us. What they're doing is separating families and doing some awful things in the United States name, and that deserves the outrage that we should be giving it. But I'll look for the pieces, but I have not seen them.
Congressman, we just have a half a minute left. I'm curious your thoughts on what we should be doing now and for the next couple of weeks until the next time we see you.
Yeah, so as you said, this is that August period that members of Congress are back home. I'm doing a town hall on Thursday, the 31st, 5 p.m. in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, in Derek Van Orden's district. But this is your chance to get a hold of your member of Congress and have a face-to-face conversation. So do that between now and the day after Labor Day. The House is home. I think the Senate might be in for another week or so. But this is a really great opportunity to schedule a meeting or go to events where your member of Congress are going to be at and be heard and hold them accountable on the big, ugly law.
There you go. Congressman, thanks so much for dropping by. It's always a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you as always, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We're at the top of the hour here. We'll be back. On the other side is the from Epstein's Island to Obama's inbox. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Decadent Society, How We Became the Victims of Our Own Success by Russ Douthat, a New York Times columnist. And this is from, it's about the middle of his first chapter. This is a subchapter titled The Limits of Neoliberalism. There's no shortage of theories to explain this great stagnation, to borrow a phrase from one of the theorizers, the George Mason University economist Tyler Cowen. And there's also no need to simply choose between them. Like most broad trends, the economic decadence of the developed world is overdetermined, and almost every serious attempt at explanation will contain some element of truth. The most politically appealing theories, the ones animating our populist and socialist insurgencies, tend to blame neoliberalism itself, claiming that the medicine for 1970s stagflation has proven to be poisonous in large doses. The push for ever freer trade has hollowed out Western economies, the argument goes, offshoring productive industries and killing decent jobs, making financiers and knowledge workers rich while the middle class shrinks steadily. Meanwhile, low tax rates intended to spur investment have enabled the rich to keep more of their gains while starving the programs required to protect the poor and boost the working classes. Antitrust policy has become so fixated on the so-called benefits of consolidation, lower prices for consumers, that it has ignored all the ways that market-dominant corporations can warp policies and strangle innovation. An anti-inflationary policy forged to counteract a crisis that's now generations behind us have been adopted as a dogma that's now by the West's financial and political elite, which demands fiscal austerity under every circumstance and deprives struggling economies of the cash they need to grow. You don't have to accept every aspect of this argument, and indeed the populists of the left and right disagree about which aspects to stress, to see that it describes a real phenomenon, perhaps not the outright failure of neoliberalism, but diminishing returns from some of its preferred policies, and an overconfidence among the Western leadership class that solutions from the 1970s are permanently applicable. On trade, for instance, the general principle that open markets have more winners than losers led policymakers to assume that this would necessarily happen and to overestimate how quickly communities affected by outsourcing would recover and how swiftly other sectors of the economy could compensate. In particular, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology economist David Autor has argued persuasively that the China shock, the dramatic offshoring that followed Beijing's entrance into the World Trade Organization in 2001, inflicted more economic damage on working-class communities in the United States than many experts anticipated, without generating the compensating growth and job creation expected elsewhere. This is not a knockdown case against free trade.
just a case against overconfidence in its incautious application. And the same argument applies to other features of the neoliberal program. It's quite possible that lower tax rates spur growth and innovation when tax rates are cut from 70% highs, but also that a program of permanent upper bracket tax cutting, as practiced by America's Republican Party, won't produce the hoped-for spillover effects among the bottom 95%. It's possible consolidation could be good for consumers, was useful for antitrust decision-making in the 1970s and 80s, but corrected as monopolies regather. It's possible that a program of deficit reduction and tight money that makes sense when inflation is galloping doesn't make sense when we're closer to deflation. The countries sometimes need a loose monetary policy to fight stagnation, and having a financial overclass too fixated on the perils of a for now imaginary inflation is a recipe for permanently lower growth. Then, alongside this brief against an overextended neoliberalism, there's a more subtle argument, pushed by the more serious sort. I think I skipped a page here. Sort of liberalism that the neoliberal program pushed too far as pushed in the wrong direction. In this argument, we don't need less deregulation, but a different kind than we have, because incumbents and insiders in the West have captured the sprawling regulatory state and used it to freeze out potential competition. The age of stagnation, according to this theory, is the fruit of what Brink Lindsay of the Niskensen Institute and Stephen Tellez of Johns Hopkins University describe as a captured economy, in which everything from land use rules to exclusionary zoning to occupational license to ever-expanding intellectual property protections to corporate subsidies and tax breaks all converge to create a system that's basically the worst of socialism and the worst of capitalism conjoined. Plutocratic and sclerotic, overregulated and undertaxed, with an upper class enriching itself off rents rather than innovation, and a service class that can't advance beyond its station. The overlap between this more libertarian argument and the left-wing critique of neoliberalism is apparent in one of the texts of the post-financial crisis left, French economist Thomas Piketty's 2013 tome, Capital in the 21st Century. Because capital will always be higher than simple economic growth unless some powerful force intervenes. The forces that intervened in the 20th century were the Great Depression and two world wars, which not only provided the impetus for massive government interventions, but destroyed outright a great deal of capitalist wealth. The book is The Decadent Society by Russ Douthat.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to the second hour of our program. From Epstein's Island to Trump's dark diversion strategy is my daily takeover at HartmannReport.com today. When the walls start closing in, Trump doesn't lawyer up. He doubles down. Well, actually, he does both. But what's going on right now with this whole Trump team and saying that Barack Obama is guilty of treason? This is not about justice or the truth. This is a deliberate psyop, a psychological operation designed to try to hijack the news cycle and enrage the MAGA base and erase Epstein's name from every chyron in America. And that's, it appears that Trump actually believes, and he's putting into place now the actions to move this forward, actually believes that if he can convince the media to take this seriously, that we have evidence that Barack Obama committed treason, that will be a big enough story to blow Epstein off the pages, off the front pages. He's tried everything. I mean, he's tried doing his tariff rants. He's tried cutting deals with other countries. He's tried going back to Hillary's emails. I mean, he has been playing all the hits, sitting there at his console pushing every distraction button he has, and none of them have worked. We're still talking about Epstein. And so now what are they doing? They're busily assigning investigators, FBI agents, lawyers, and others in the Justice Department to find everything they can
that might implicate Barack Obama in any kind of crime, particularly something that they might be able to call treason. It's wild. I mean, you know, it's also going back to the Russia thing, where we know that in 2016, according to a report that was signed off on by Marco Rubio, Republicans in the Senate said, yes, Russia did influence the 2016 election in a way that helped Donald Trump. Yes, we have that officially from both the GOP, well, not the GOP as an institution, but from Republican senators and Republican members of the House. They all signed off on this thing because it's obvious. I mean, Russia. Putin admitted it. He was asked by a reporter, you know, did you interfere in the 2016 election to help Trump? And he said, yes, I did, because Trump said that he wanted to repair relations between Russia and the United States. Who wouldn't? Why wouldn't I do that? I mean, it's like you have a confession. But, you know, Trump has tried to say, oh, no, this whole Epstein thing is just like the Russia thing, which is true. They're both true, apparently. But, you know, oh, they're both hoaxes. Yeah, right. So where does this go? And why is it that this is so sticky? There was a new study that was just published in October of last year, just a few months ago, 9 months ago, in the Journal of Research in Personality. It was titled Malevolent versus Benevolent Dispositions and Conservative Political Ideology in the Trump Era. And what these researchers did is they said, you know, well, here's a quote. Autocrats manifest socially aversive personality, including malevolent traits in the dark triad, narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. And the same has been found for Trump. Similar results have been found for authoritarians' loyal foot soldiers. Thus, it is not surprising, perhaps, that voters with aversive traits tend to prefer aversive political figures. In other words, the followers, the authoritarian followers of Trump are just as authoritarian as he is. It's just that he has leadership characteristics and they don't. They're just followers. And then they point out that there's numerous studies that have found that people with malevolent dispositions, in other words, people who have this kind of negative, hateful worldview, are drawn to conservative political philosophy. You know, and so what is a malevolent disposition? Well, first off, a malevolent disposition reflects wishing ill will or doing harm to others, while a benevolent disposition involves intending or showing goodwill or kindness to others. A malevolent disposition is measured via aversive features of Machiavellian manipulativeness, psychopathic callousness, and narcissistic self-absorption, all negatively associated with empathy and positively associated with antisocial behavior. And then they go on. What does this mean for politics? Well, they say a political candidate, again, I'm quoting from this study, a political candidate who boasts about being able to shoot someone can be understood in terms of a malevolent disposition. We seek to understand the voters who embrace such a politician and propose that insight may be gained by examining the links between malevolent dispositions and political ideology. Taken together, we propose that more extreme malevolent dispositions are necessary for understanding today's modern incarnation of conservatism that includes a positive view of Trump. In other words, conservatives are you know, a little ill, shall we say. And they even go beyond that. I mean, they basically say that the people who are most extremely mentally ill, the psychopaths, are the most enthusiastic about Trump. This is, again, quoting from the study. Across 2 different samples, we found a positive association between conservative ideology and a positive view of Trump and malevolent dispositions. For white men, psychopathic propensities predicted conservative ideology and a positive view of Trump. Get that? Psychopathic propensities predicted? Thus, the current results add to a growing literature on a link between malevolent or aversive dispositions and conservative ideology. Moreover, our results are in line with Barber and Pope in 2019, who found those tied to a Trump symbolic ideology were most inclined to be uncivil to others. This was people who wore MAGA hats, for example, the symbolic ideology. And the results from both samples found that latent psychopathic and malevolent disposition means, the averages, were significantly elevated among individuals who viewed Trump favorably. Right. Now, they did note that among women and people, this was not the case. That about 20% of the population, regardless of race or gender, are authoritarians. But the authoritarian women and the authoritarian black people, by and large, mostly black men, tended not to support Trump. And they asked the question, why? Well, because these people have been the victims of right-wing authoritarianism. They've been the victims of social dominance orientation, what's called SDO. And they, again, from the study, longitudinal research suggests that race/ethnicity may moderate the associations of right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation with conservative political behavior, and gender might moderate the association between personality and conservatism, with a stronger association for males than females. These moderating effects may be due in part to the fact that right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation are linked with, and here it comes, racism and sexism. So, black people and women have experienced this firsthand. They're more likely to say, no, that's the wrong thing to do. But white men with their little bubble of white privilege throughout their lives, no idea. So given that, Trump's base is basically mentally ill, this study kind of nails it, and or at the very least, antisocial, suffering from antisocial personality disorders. Will accusing Obama of treason be enough to get Trump out of his current problems? Well, I think with his base, it will. But the problem is his base is only 15% of America. It's a small, it's a small part of the overall Republican Party, and the Republican Party is only 24% of America. So will it work? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to work with the larger, group in Congress. I think that, America is going to call Trump's bluff. I think, in fact, it could even backfire. And, the other question that I have is this going to be the thing that finally causes Obama to stand up on his own 2 feet and start fighting back? I mean, he didn't when they stole Merrick Garland from him. For a whole year, he was essentially silent as Mitch McConnell, just refused to hold a hearing for Merrick Garland. So will this cause Obama and then presumably also, or hopefully also, Biden and Harris to stand up and say, wait a minute, there's something wrong here? Or Clinton and Bush, for that matter. Or will J.D. Vance get his shot at the presidency that he so clearly seems to crave? What do you think? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Well, actually, one more story for you, and then we'll pick up the calls.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Right back with you, 15 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday, too. And welcome back. Rick in Castro Valley, California. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Good morning. How are you today? Hope all's well. I wanted to get on while the congressman was there. He talked about, focusing on kitchen table issues. And I do understand that line of thinking. But we did that in 24, and we provided a blueprint for a better life for most Americans, and they still rejected Kamala. Now, we also know that there's some extraneous factors that played into that decision. But I think where I agree with him, we should focus on that, but we can do two things at one time. I think we focus on the economic hit that we'll all take as a result of Trump's legislation, his budget, but we also need to keep amplifying this Epstein thing because, Tom, you are a reflection of the company you keep. I didn't hang out with child molesters and murderers, and I didn't grow up in the best of circumstances. My people were good people, good friends. We all were ambitious. We all had certain tragedies in our lives, but we never went to extreme criminal behavior. This is a textbook case of Trump thinking that he could pull this off because he's gotten away with everything for so long, and it's come back to get him. And secondarily, I want to grab your thoughts on the potentiality of, giving Maxwell some sort of reduced sentence or pardon. I hope they do that. That would tip the scales against him. Trump is he's just not much of a thinker. He's not very strategic. He's very reactionary. And that would blow the top off this. You don't get 90% of Americans agreeing on anything. So if he wants to go pull that off, and Bondi and all those folks, give it a shot. But I think that will be the issue that will tip the scale against him among a vast majority of Americans. And so thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm an avid listener, you know that, and I love your show and all the folks who make contributions. I wish I was just as smart as some of them. I'm not, but I learn a lot every day.
You're doing well, Rick. I'm wondering if Dan Bongino ever came back to his office in the FBI. He refused to come back for a couple of days last Friday and Monday, I think it was, because he was so upset about this Epstein stuff. And Pam Bondi now has been missing for 3 days. She's claiming that she has a torn retina, or torn cornea, excuse me, the outer surface of the eye. I thought that you just put an eye patch on and soldiered on. I didn't know that you had to drop out of life, when you had a torn cornea. But I've never had one, so I don't know. But it sure looks to me, Rick, like there's some real scrambling going on inside the Department of Justice that our Attorney General is not dealing with well. Have you seen any indications of that?
No, no. I mean, they aren't dealing with it well. It's just, again, another measure of chaos coming out of that administration. It's nonstop every day. And I can't imagine that using his previous stint as a backdrop, that people wanted more of this.
Yeah.
And then after just listening to your last segment, I get it. But even if they're 15 to 20% of this nation's population, shame on us for allowing this to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you, Rick. I'm with you. Today, Trump is flying to Scotland, and the largest newspaper in the country, the front page, felon to visit Scotland. That was the headline. Rick, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Back with in 1 minute with more of your calls. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Way back in 1964, when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Republicans started this rant about how the election of 1960, Jock Kennedy stole that election, and there's voter fraud in America. And it became a thing. They started this thing called Operation Eagle Eye. William Rehnquist was running it in Arizona, trying to intimidate Hispanics and African Americans into not voting, essentially. They've now used this claim that non-citizens are voting, this voter fraud claim, in red state to make it harder to vote, to purge people off the voting rolls, to make people's votes not counted with their exact signature matches. It's a scam. It's a grift that they've been running for 60 years, and the American media won't call them out on it. There's a whole piece about it called Trump and the GOP's Big Lie 2.0 over at HartmannReport.com. Please check it out. You'll find it fascinating.
The lights go dim on Epstein's file. Echoes of scandal start to compile. The chorus of headlines swirls in smoke. Truth is a victim, lies provoke. When the walls close in and no options remain, they write a script to deflect the blame. Ghosts in the wings, crowd on their toes. A conspiracy spins as the tension grows. Welcome to Trump's Treason Theater, where the base cheers louder than truth. hailing Obama as traitor uncool. They're selling outrage, fear in the foyer. Dismiss what's real, keep the crowd on fire. He points the finger at 208, says a liberal king sealed America's fate. Meanwhile, Epstein's name holds, but he's backstage staying low. It's a shell game made for desperate minds. In the land of spin, justice unwinds. A puppet master laughs behind the veil, playing madness in a theater of derail. Welcome to Trump's treason theater.
About 24 minutes past the hour, so rising starvation on the Gaza Strip. This is just a terrible, a god-awful situation. I mean, there is a long genesis here. I've been in Israel when suicide bombs went off just, half a mile down the road. This country has been traumatized for, decades, certainly, almost a century. And yet, also, the Palestinians have been, had their land taken from them. They've been treated brutally, particularly by the Netanyahu regime now for, 15 or more years. And now you've got actual starvation going on in the Gaza Strip. And an Israeli minister yesterday, Amichai Eliyahu, he's a right-wing minister. He leads Israel's Heritage Ministry. He said in a radio interview, quote, Israel should not feed the Gazans. So they should just basically let them starve. He said, and I quote, "There is no nation that feeds its enemies. The British didn't feed the Nazis, nor did the Americans feed the Japanese, nor do the Russians feed the Ukrainians now." Now, I would point out that that's not true. We did feed Nazis. When we captured Nazis, we fed them. In fact, we treated them very well, so well that many of them just decided, hey, I want to stay in the United States after World War II. And Britain fed Nazis, and we fed the Japanese, and the Russians and the Ukrainians feed Russians right now. In fact, large numbers of Russian soldiers are defecting to Ukraine because they're being fed. When you treat people well, they're more inclined to say, hey, I'd like to be with you. The Hamas, with the $1 billion+ that Netanyahu has given them over the years because he's been trying to play Hamas against the PLO on the West Bank, a cynical, horrible, cynical game. Hamas had been running food distribution. They've been running retirement programs. They've been running the schools and hospitals. They've been running Gaza with Netanyahu's approval and funding for decades. And so, of course, people are, bonded to them. And do you really think that starving people is going to make them like you? The Israeli opposition politicians immediately condemned his statements that they should just go ahead and starve these people. But we're seeing now, lots and lots of children, young people, even UN workers are becoming emaciated. There just is no food. And while Israel's now allowing some food into Gaza, it's drastically reduced the numbers of places where you can get it and the circumstances under which you can get it. And every day, the people who are coming out to get this food keep getting shot by the Israeli army, by the IDF. So this is Yair Lapid, the centrist leader of Israel's political opposition, said Eliyahu's comments were, quote, a moral stain and a public diplomacy disaster. Israel will never convince the world of the justness of our war against terror as long as we are led by an extremist minority government with ministers who glorify blood and death. Amen. Amazing.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In Los Angeles, grand juries are refusing to indict ICE protesters. I'll tell you about that and pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Our book club selection today is by Raghuram Rajan. It's titled The Third Pillar, How Markets and the State Leave the Community Behind. This is from the preface. We're surrounded by plenty. Humanity has never been richer as technologies of production have improved steadily over the last 250 years. And it's not just the developed countries that have grown wealthy. Across the developing world have moved from stressful poverty to a comfortable middle-class existence in the span of a generation. Income is more evenly spread across the world than at any other time in our lives. For the first time in history, we have it in our power to eradicate hunger and starvation everywhere. Yet, even though the world has achieved economic successes that would have been unimaginable even a few decades ago, some of the seemingly most privileged workers in developed countries are literally worried. 500,000 more middle-aged, non-Hispanic white American males died between 1999 and 2013 than if their death rates had followed the trend of other ethnic groups. The additional deaths were concentrated among those with a high school degree or less, and largely due to drugs, alcohol, and suicide. To put these deaths in perspective, it's as if 10 Vietnam Wars were simultaneously taking place, not in some faraway land, but in homes in small town and rural America. In an era of seeming plenty, a group that once epitomized the American dream seems to have lost hope. The anxieties of the moderately educated, middle-aged white male in the United States are mirrored in other rich, developed countries in the West, though perhaps with less tragic effects. The primary source of worry seems to be that moderately educated workers are rapidly losing, or are at risk of losing, good middle-class employment. And this has grievous effects on them, their families, and the communities they live in. It is widely understood that job losses stem from both global trade and the technological automation of old jobs. Less well understood is that technological progress has been the more important cause. Nonetheless, as public anxiety turns to anger, radical politicians see more value in attacking imports and immigrants. They propose to protect manufacturing jobs by overturning the liberal, rules-based post-war economic order, the system that has facilitated the flow of goods, capital, and people across borders. There is both promise and peril in our future. The promise comes from new technologies that can help us solve our most worrisome problems like poverty and climate change. Fulfilling it requires keeping borders open so that these innovations can be taken to the most underdeveloped parts of the world, even while attracting people from foreign lands to support aging rich country populations. Suspects, the state, and markets. Many forests have been consumed by books today in the Thom Hartmann book between the two. Serious some favoring the state and others markets. It is I think I skipped a page here. Sort of liberalism that the neoliberal program hasn't so much pushed too far as pushed in the wrong direction. In this argument, we don't need less deregulation, but a different kind we have, because incumbents and insiders in the West have captured the sprawling regulatory state and used it to freeze out potential competition. The age of stagnation, according to this theory, is the fruit of what Brink Lindsay of the Niskenson Institute and Stephen Tellez of Johns Hopkins University describe as a captured economy. in which everything from land use rules to exclusionary zoning to occupational licensing to ever-expanding intellectual property protections to corporate subsidies and tax breaks all converge to create a system that's basically the worst of socialism and the worst of capitalism conjoined. Plutocratic and sclerotic, overregulated and undertaxed, with an upper class enriching itself off rents rather than innovation, and a service class that can't advance beyond its station. The overlap between this more libertarian argument and the left-wing critique of neoliberalism is apparent in one of the texts of the post-financial crisis left, French economist Thomas Piketty's 2013 tome Capital in the 21st Century, which mined centuries worth of statistics to argue that capitalism inherently makes the rich richer because returns on capital will always be higher than simple economic growth unless some powerful force intervenes. The forces that intervened in the 20th century were the Great Depression and
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So back when Donald Trump debated Kamala Harris, he was asked about world leaders and whatnot, and he went off on this thing praising a guy named Viktor Orban and saying he's a tough guy, he's smart, he's the prime minister of Hungary, and he loves me, basically. So who is Viktor Orban? Well, it turns out Viktor Orban is a guy who took over Hungary in a regular election, the prime minister, and then turned it into basically a neo-fascist paradise for right-wingers. All the media is now controlled by right-wing oligarchs. He's packed the courts. He's changed the constitution. They have things like gerrymandering and voter suppression, so he always wins every election. He throws people in jail for criticizing him, even on Facebook. I mean, this is what Hungary, Fox News loves it. Tucker Carlson did his show from there for a week, and that's what Donald Trump wants to do to America. You can read the whole thing over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Trump's New Hero, the strongman who crushed democracy in Hungary. Check it out. And welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour, and just a quick story here. In Los Angeles, the U.S. attorneys, Bill Essayli, I'm probably mispronouncing it, Essayli, is under apparently tremendous pressure from Pam Bondi to just nail some of these people who protested Donald Trump moving troops to surround the federal building in Los Angeles. A number of people were arrested in these protests, and this is fascinating. This is from the LA Times. Quote, the three officials who spoke to the Times on anonymity said prosecutors have struggled to get several protest-related cases past grand juries, which need only find probable cause that a crime has been committed to move forward. This is a much lower bar than the beyond a reasonable doubt standard required for criminal conviction. On an overheard call, according to the three officials, Essayli, 39, told a subordinate to disregard the federal the Justice Department's Justice Manual, which directs prosecutors to only bring cases they can win at trial. Essayli barked that prosecutors should press on and secure indictments as directed by U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. So bottom line, they are trying to prosecute people just to break them. If you're subject to criminal prosecution in the federal courts, you're looking at tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills, even when you win. And so they want to try to prosecute people that they know they're going to lose the case. The government knows they're going to lose, but they want to prosecute them anyway in order to break them financially. And the grand juries, in order to do that, you got to get a grand jury to indict. And the grand juries are saying, are you crazy? We're not going to do this. Grand juries, of course, made up of average citizens. Not a good moment for the U.S. Justice Department and Pam Bondi. So what's on your mind today? Ollie in Northwoods, Wisconsin. Hey, Ollie, thanks for listening to Civic Media. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I heard on the news this morning that they were using the airport runways in Alligator Alley to deport people now. And I was wondering if you had heard anything and if they're doing this without notifying the courts or without the courts knowing anything about this.
I don't know, Ollie. I have not heard that. I've not read that. It is an airport. I mean, that's the place where they built this alligator Alcatraz is an airport.
When I heard that they were putting that there, I assumed right away that was their plan, was to be able to deport people without the government knowing about
Without
it,
oversight.
without the courts knowing about it.
Yeah.
And now that seems like that might be what they're up to.
Where did you see this reported?
Well, I heard it on the news. I'm
Whose
in
news?
Wisconsin, and I heard it on the news today.
On Civic Media, on the station you're listening to now?
Yep.
Uh-huh. Okay, I'll have to track that story down. Somehow that one, I missed that one. Thank you for the heads up on that, Ollie.
Okie doke. All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Yep. David in San Pedro, California. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk with you again. Free Speech runs an announcement in between breaks about Adriana Smith and how she's been in the hospital brain dead for months and months and months and months since February, is my understanding. And she recently gave birth to a child by cesarean, so the hospital did it.
Right.
But one thing I've never heard about that case, which is nasty enough, who is paying for the bill? Because
the family is receiving the
probably
bill for this.
being brain dead, she was in intensive care at the time, which is thousands of dollars a day normally.
Yeah.
And where does the bill go to? I mean, the state has mandated it. Why?
It's going to their
paying
family, or at least it was. When this whole thing started, the family was protesting because they were informed that they would be presented with a bill. I don't know how it's ended up. Now that the baby has been quote born.
Yeah, well, the baby was not due till August, so the baby's premature too, and
Correct.
there's more
Which
more
incurs
bills
a
to be
whole
paid.
brand new set of expenses. Yeah. I've not been keeping up with that, David. So I'm sorry, I don't know right off the top of my head. Geez, that's 2 stories in a row. I'm not on. I'm sorry. I thought I was doing a pretty good job here, but apparently I missed a couple of these things.
You do a great job.
Okay,
I have no complaints.
Okay, well, I'll have to track that one down too. David, thank you very much. Jay in Rockville, Maryland. Hey, Jay, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how are you today? Yeah, I just want to say, once again, you know, excellent topic and wonderful call-ins. Very informative because you learn so much on your show.
Thank you.
My comment is that, this whole Epstein thing, I know the Republicans want to downplay it, but they have to understand, and we should understand, that this is probably one of the biggest scenarios that this government has to face.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that for this reason. At one time, the church, not just the Catholic Church, but all churches, found out, were forced to, but had to deal with the fact that they had to get rid of pedophiles in ministry in order to perform their core mission, which is to bring souls to Christ, to bring people into the church.
Well, Jay, I would argue that the Catholic Church decided that they had to strip out the pedophiles because they were tired of paying the lawsuits. But regardless of the reason, yes.
Okay. So my point is that's a sense of corruption that really pulled out, even with the lawsuits, pulls out the fact that how can you be holy if you allow this to occur?
Right.
Allow your ministries to prey on children, and no one's going to take their kids to church if they think that's going to happen. Now, on the other side, it's become morally and politically damaged by this Epstein scenario, because I'm going to tell you, it takes a whole lot of people to run the kind of network he had.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't expect and don't want, they definitely don't want the government to protect pedophiles and not disclose if they have pedophiles in the ranks of Congress and in the Trump administration.
Right.
Why? Because it's going to corrupt. It corrupts the moral compass of this country. And that's exactly what has happened. People don't want to talk about it. But
there were a couple of high-profile Trump aides or followers or people very close to him who were convicted of sex crimes with children or possession of child porn. I don't recall their names, but I do recall one of them was associated with Russia. He was fairly high up. This was in his. Those stories have kind of vanished too. I need to dig those out and track those back.
Yeah, last comment I want to make, because I feel like there's we need to get the pedophiles out of Congress and out of the administration, because they got to be there. Because just like in the ministry, in the ministries, they're corrupt ministers who are pedophiles. You mean to tell me that Congress is holier than the church? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think any institution is immune to this kind of thing, but yeah.
But exactly. Yeah. That is my point. So why aren't we trying to also look at what the character is of those who are trying to lead this country? Yeah. Because right now, that's the reason why we're having problems, to be honest with you. We have a problem with the moral compass of this country. That's why we don't feed people who are in need of food, not only overseas, but in our own country.
Yeah, no, I get it, Jay. I get it. Yeah, the GOP has become an insanely immoral organization. Jay, thank you for the call. 44 and a half minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit .com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truths Donald Trump would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Dee in Seattle. Hey, Dee, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I saw an interview with Karen Howe. She's the author of Empire of AI. Mm-hmm. She was bringing up how, the global water hunt, because of the military aspect use of AI. She was bringing up, like, Chile, how Google kind of chose that to tap into, and they're using more water than the citizens are kind of using.
To cool
I
the
just wondered if you would,
Mm-hmm.
And the military kind of aspect. But I was wondering, with Jordan, Israel, they've had over a 5-year drought, and they're kind of overly interested in Lebanon, Syria, who has larger water sources than agricultural land. Do you think they're trying to do land grabs and water grabs for AI at the expense of people won't get pure water, but AI will kind of?
I don't know about the AI aspect of that, Dee. I know that it's, the AI's thirst for water and energy is massive, and it's growing. And, hopefully we'll see advances in computer technology that will reduce that need, because we're fairly early in this thing. But we also know that, we're already seeing water wars all over the world, where you've got territorial wars that are being fought over good farmland that hasn't been affected. And you're also seeing, even in the American West and Southwest now, states essentially going to war with each other, or at least legally, over water. So it's just beginning to get bad. I mean, the weather result of climate change are really starting to hit us right now.
Do you believe it's a factual thing, the Greater Israel Plan, or do you think that's false?
There's an open debate in Israel where you've got, Ben Gvir and these other right-wingers that are part of Netanyahu's coalition, and some of them are in his cabinet, who are openly racist and openly saying that all the Palestinians should be expelled from Israel. About 20% of Israeli citizens are Palestinian, a fact that is very rarely mentioned. And that the Palestinians who are occupying what they call Israeli territory, and in the West Bank and in Gaza, should be pushed out entirely. And Israel should cut a deal with Jordan or with Saudi Arabia or somebody to Egypt to take these people so that they can then develop that land. And they're slowly just basically stealing land on the West Bank. Every week, it seems they tear down another house. So, you know, all of that is happening, and we can acknowledge all of it, and some of it is very, very aggressively tied in with global warming and you know, massive global droughts and wildfires. But some of it is not. I mean, Israel trying to take all that land from the Palestinians, I don't think it has anything to do with water or global warming.
Yeah.
I think it has to do with just pure good old-fashioned racism and nationalism.
Yeah, I just wonder how countries are going to handle, do people get pure water? For important that AI has to have pure water.
Yeah.
You know, do people get the
Well, and it's not just
deal on
AI.
that?
I mean, there's you know, lots of industries that use massive amounts of water. Probably the largest one being the bottled water industry. Yeah, this is a growing problem because what we're seeing is the normal equilibrium of water all over the planet is being disrupted because the atmosphere is holding more water, which means that areas that tend to dry tend to be even more dry because the atmosphere just holds more of that moisture, and areas that tend to be wet are tending to be far more wet because when it does dump that water, it's more. And so we're seeing more droughts and more flooding. And this is just the beginning. I wrote a book about this in '96, Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, and it was just starting back then. Dee, thank you for the call. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So between his tax cuts and crashing the debt ceiling and shifting billions of Treasury dollars into crypto and tariffs and all this other stuff, Trump is threatening to crash our economy. And he doesn't seem to be particularly worried about that. Why would that be? Well, first off, economic disasters are great excuses to cut taxes. Both Reagan and George W. Bush used recessions as their excuse to stimulate the economy by cutting trillions from the taxes of billionaires. Secondly, economic crises increase the tolerance for strongman governments. Hitler rode to power in Europe based on the Great Depression. And third, billionaires make a fortune when there's a market crash because they can buy all the stock that average people are trying to unload from their 401ks to pay the damn rent. There's a whole article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Crashing the Economy, Trump's Blueprint for Power and Profit. Check it out. Back, it's 10 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
Say, when something's going on and there's a big kerfluffle, a lot of times it can be a distraction, trying to pull your attention away from things you might be thinking. And I think this Ghislaine and Epstein is a big distraction. I think the real problem is there is an article, I'll give you my source, Epstein, Trump, and the Fashion Front. And it's on Substack, and it's aliciasonger.substack.com. And it shows where Trump, Epstein, and a man named Jean-Luc Brunel and and John Casablancas, they all had modeling agencies. And, you know, Ghislaine probably did some stuff.
And Trump an agency, too, by the way.
He's part of this network.
Yeah.
There's a whole network, and it'll show a diagram how they were just shuttling girls into
Casablancas is the guy who started all this. Yeah. It's called the Elite Modeling Agency. Yeah.
In 14 years, they starts at 14 years, and you know this whole event, they may pick out a couple to make it look legit, like, oh, gee, she got a modeling job, and all these other girls are being just conveyed into these, for being abused by rich men. It's just to snag these girls in. That is where you should look for Trump. If he's a pedophile, and I want to ask you, Tom, do you, in your gut, do you think he's been a pedophile?
I don't know. I really don't know. He
that's
seems...
right. That's right up there with cannibalism, pedophilia.
I get that, Diane. I don't think any of us will know until the evidence comes out.
If they let it out, and if that is true, if he was, he's done.
Oh, I
would
agree.
hope
But I think that
we're not so
you know,
depraved.
the thing that is hurting him right now is that it's obvious he's lying about something, and he's trying to cover something
Right.
up. I mean, that's obvious even to his base, and so they're
Right.
going to think they're
Is
going to
there-
assume the worst, and that hurts his credibility right across the board. So when he talks about tariffs or he talks about taxes or anything else, people are going to go, well, yeah, this guy's a liar. Why am I listening to him? Diane, thank you for the call. Theodore in Everett, Washington. Hey, Theodore, what's up?
Hello, Tom. So I was calling in about Ethan Doe. He's been stuck in Antarctica from the Chilean police after trying to become the youngest person to go to all 7 continents. And what's so interesting is
did he
about
sail a
this is-
boat or something to Antarctica?
No, he was flying all around, and he had complications flying to his last continent, which I can't remember exactly which one it was, but he had problems, which he had to make like a emergency flight to a station in Antarctica, and he was greeted by them. He signed stuff up, and then later, right after that, some of the Chilean police came, and they talked to him and said that he was under arrest.
Uh-huh. And I should care about this because...
Chilean, it shows that they're trying to show that they have control over that part of Antarctica, and they're
Well, they
kind
do,
of
don't they? I mean, I was
claiming-
down there. It's actually the Argentinians were the ones that were controlling the part that we were at, but they clearly controlled it. And, you know, it's been split up among a bunch of countries. There are multi-country areas.
Yeah.
But it's an extremely fragile environment. I mean, when we were there, in order to get off the boat and stand on the land in the continent of Antarctica, we had to be sprayed down with bleach before we could get off the boat, just to make sure that we weren't carrying bird flu or any other pathogen. You know, if he's not being very, very careful, he could be spreading, you know, death and disease to a pristine wildlife area.
What this is about, they has the whole international treaty that no one's allowed to claim Antarctica.
Not the
which
entire
if-
continent, no, but they do
Yeah.
have, but individual countries, I'm pretty sure, have some control over some parts of it. And there's, of course, a bunch of international agreements. Theodore, I'm sorry, this is not something that really rings my bells, but it's interesting to hear about. Thank you for the call. George in Cripple Creek, Virginia. Hey, George, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. You know, today President Putin gave a speech right in the Northern Shipbuilding Company in Severodvinsk, Russia, on the Akava project, 995 SSN nuclear attack sub, right? And he's claiming that this is the most advanced fourth-generation nuclear attack sub, you know, with increased stealth technology, increased weaponry, and completely outclasses our U.S. Navy's third-generation Seawolf and Virginia submarines. He also claims that this shipyard is series producing SSBNs, you know, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, NSA project, and stealth diesel-electric submarines that can operate in enclosed seas like the Baltic. I wanted to ask, you know, Congressman Pocan about that, but I couldn't get a chance. But, you know, this is true. This is really, you know, threatening.
Yeah. And then on top of that, the Chinese are like way ahead of us in drone technology. Russians are leapfrogging.
Yeah, and in, you know, stealth fighter technology.
Yeah. We have.
In the old days, you know, Soviet Navy submarines were so noisy they sounded like freight trains under the water. You could easily track them, but now this new generation is almost completely untrackable.
Whoa. Yeah, not good. I mean, you know, part of the problem, it seems to me, George, is that we have been, you know, because of the military-industrial complex, we've been, you know, stuck in this thing of just pouring more money into their projects that they decide on rather than military experts. But, you know, what do I know?
Yeah, what's, you know, technologically advanced and more, you know, viable.
Yeah, there you go. George, always so nice to hear from you. Thank you so much for the call. We'll be right back on the other side of the break with the third hour of the program. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free one daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Today, we're reading from Elon Papp's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. This is from the preface. It's titled The Red House. The Red House was a typical early Tel Avivian building, the pride of the Jewish builders and craftsmen who toiled over in the 1920s. It had been designed to house the head office of the local Workers' Council. It remained such until toward the end of 1947, it became the headquarters of the Haganah, the main Zionist underground militia in Palestine. Located near the sea on Yarkon Street in the northern part of Tel Aviv, the building formed another fine addition to the first Hebrew city on the Mediterranean, the White City, as its literati and pundits affectionately called it. For in those days, unlike today, the immaculate whiteness of his houses still bathed the town as a whole in the opulent brightness so typical of Mediterranean port cities of that era and that region. It was a sight for sore eyes, elegantly fusing Bauhaus motifs with native Palestinian architecture in an admixture that was called Levantine in the least derogatory sense of the term. Such too was the Red House, its simple rectangular features graced with frontal arches that framed the entrance and supported the balconies of its 2 upper stories. It was either its association with the workers' movement that had inspired the adjective red, or its pinkish tinge that it acquired during sunset that had given the house its name. The former was more fitting as the building continued to be associated with the Zionist version of socialism when, in the 1970s, it became the main office for Israel's kibbutzim movement. Houses like this, important historical remnants of the mandatory period, prompted UNESCO in 2003 to designate Tel Aviv as a World Heritage Site. Today, the house is no longer there, a victim of development, which has razed this architectural relic to the ground to make room for a car park next to the new Sheraton Hotel. Thus, in this street, too, no traces left of the White City, which it has slowly transmogrified into the sprawling, polluted, extravagant metropolis that is the modern Tel Aviv. This building on a cold Wednesday afternoon, 10 March 1948, a group of 11 men, veteran Zionist leaders, together with young military Jewish officers, put the final touches on a plan for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That same evening, military orders were dispatched to the units on the ground to prepare for the systematic expulsion of Palestinians from vast areas of the country. The detailed description of the methods to be employed to forcibly evict the people: large-scale intimidation, laying siege to and bombarding villages and population centers, setting fire to homes, properties, goods, expulsion, demolition, and finally planting mines among the rubble to prevent any of the expelled inhabitants from returning. Each unit was issued with its own list of villages and neighborhoods as the targets of the master plan. Codenamed Plan D, Dalet in Hebrew, this was the 4th and final version of less substantial plans that outlined the fate the Zionists had in store for Palestine and consequently for its native population. The previous three schemes had articulated only obscurely how the Zionist leadership contemplated dealing with the presence of so many Palestinians living in the land that the Jewish national movement owned. This fourth and last blueprint spelled it out clearly and unambiguously. Quote, the Palestinians have to go, end quote. In the words of one of the first historians to note the significance of that plan, Simcha Flapan, the military campaign against the Arabs, including the conquest and destruction of the rural areas, was set forth in the Haganah's plan Dalet. The aim for the plan was in fact the destruction of both the rural and urban areas of Palestine. As the first chapters of this book will attempt to show, this plan was both the inevitable product of the Zionist ideological impulse to have an exclusively Jewish presence in Palestine, and a response to developments on the ground once the British cabinet had decided to end the mandate. Clashes with local Palestinian militias provided the perfect context and pretext for implementing the ideological vision of an ethnically cleansed Palestine. The Zionist policy was first based on retaliation against Palestinian attacks in February of 1947, and it transformed into an initiative to ethnically cleanse the country as a whole in March of 1948. Once the decision was taken, it took 6 months to complete the mission. When it was over, more than half of Palestine's native population, close to 800,000 people, had been uprooted. 531 villages had been destroyed, and 11 urban neighborhoods had been emptied of their inhabitants. On 10 March 1948, and above all, its systematic implementation in the following months, was a clear-cut case of ethnic cleansing operation regarded under international law today as a crime against humanity. After the Holocaust, it has become impossible to conceal large-scale crimes against humanity. Our modern communication-driven world, especially since the upsurge of electronic media, no longer allows human-made catastrophes to remain hidden from the public eye or to be denied. And yet one such crime has been erased almost totally from the global public memory: the disposition of the Palestinians in 1948 by Israel. This, the most formative element in the modern history of the land of Palestine, has ever since been systematically denied and is still today not recognized as an historical fact, let alone acknowledged as a crime that needs to be confronted politically as well as morally. Ethnic cleansing is a crime against humanity, and the people who perpetrate it today are considered criminals to be brought before special tribunals. It may be difficult to decide how one ought to deal with in the legal sphere those who initiated and perpetrated ethnic cleansing in Palestine in 1948, but it's impossible to reconstruct their crimes. Anyhow, it continues the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to our third hour. By the way, tickets to KPFT's soiree with me and Grant Peoples, including a Q&A and a book signing session at Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church on August 9th in Houston, are details on my Facebook site. It's at the very top. It's pinned there. Somebody called in the last hour and asked about deportation flights from Alligator Alcatraz, and sure enough, CNN reporting deportation flights from Alligator Alcatraz have begun, or Alligator Auschwitz, as it's called. Ron DeSantis said it. He said, we had a number of flights in the last few days. We've had 2 or 3 removal flights. We'll continue to have those removal flights. Up to 100 individuals who were illegally present in the state of Florida have already been removed from the United States. No indication about whether there's any due process associated with these. Whether there's judges or lawyers or anything, which is not a good thing. I mean, it sure looks to me, in these detention facilities, Donald Trump is building himself what dictators typically do: a private police and prison system that is loyal only to him. The ICE now has a larger budget than the entire Federal Bureau of Prisons, which runs, all the Supermax prisons and all the other prisons all across the country.
ICE has a substantially larger budget than the entire Federal Bureau of Prisons. So it looks to me like they're creating a shadow prison system, a shadow court system, a shadow legal system, and a shadow police system. And that is not something that should happen in a democracy. This is not good. And, you know, we need to be speaking out, in particular with our members against this. Alan Dershowitz has been out speaking on TV and the media and whatnot. Of course, he was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. He helped him negotiate that sweetheart plea deal. Back in 1996, he met Epstein. This is from a timeline by Richard Hine called the Dershowitz-Epstein timeline. Lady Rothschild introduced him to Dershowitz to Epstein. And then May of 1997, a year later, Dershowitz writes an op-ed in the Los Angeles Times saying, and I quote, this is a quote from it, "There must be criminal sanctions against sex with very young children, but it is doubtful whether such sanctions should apply to teenagers above the age of puberty, since voluntary sex is so common in their age group." He suggested that 15 was a reasonable age of consent, no matter how old the partner was. Oh, really? What an interesting, worldview here. From 1998 to 2005, Dershowitz flew on Epstein's jet multiple, including to Epstein Island. Epstein also lent Dershowitz his Florida home for a family vacation, which included his grandchildren. All of that might have been perfectly innocent. I mean, who knows? But prior to his 2006 arrest in Florida, Epstein donated $8.4 million to support Harvard faculty and programs. Dershowitz was faculty at Harvard, which kind of cemented his friendship and academic bond with Dershowitz. Dershowitz wrote for his 50th birthday book. In 2005, Dershowitz joined Epstein's defense team while his friend is, quote, under investigation for sexual relations with underage girls. In 2006, the Florida police arrested him for soliciting minors. In 2007, New York Magazine reported that Dershowitz tried to discredit Epstein accusers by hiring private investigators to scour their MySpace pages to dig up posts casting them in a negative light. One family complained to police that they were being harassed by Dershowitz's investigators. Quote, "The police said that one girl had called another to say those who help Epstein will be compensated and those who hurt him will be dealt with," end quote. In 2008, Dershowitz helped craft a secret non-prosecution agreement, giving immunity to Epstein and potential co-conspirators, which, I don't know, might include Dershowitz. The agreement, which potentially protected Dershowitz himself, was later declared illegal. This is from the Palm Beach Post. In 2008, also, Epstein pled guilty to a state charge. He served 13 months, but with a work release where he didn't have to stay in jail during the days. In December 2014, Virginia Guffrey filed an affidavit alleging that Epstein trafficked her to Dershowitz and Prince Andrew. She and Dershowitz traded defamation suits in 2015 through April 2016. In April of 2019, she launched a new defamation suit against Dershowitz. He countersued. They settled out of court. The New Yorker reports that Dershowitz has corrected his previous claim that he, quote, never had a massage at Epstein's home. In his updated version of events, he admits that he did have a massage at Epstein's home, but it was given by, quote, a 50-year-old Russian woman named Olga, and I kept my underwear on. Yeah. Got a bridge? Well, could be. On 10th August, then, just a month later, Epstein was found dead. And then a month after that, or excuse me, a year after that, in May of 2020, Guffrey reiterated her claims on Netflix's Jeffrey Epstein Filthy Rich movie. Dershowitz continues to deny them. But she and Dershowitz achieved a non-monetary out-of-court settlement. And then, of course, she committed suicide in April of 2025. In March of 2025, Dershowitz tells Sean Spicer, quote, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed, and they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them, but I'm bound by confidentiality. Well, that's interesting. And then in May of 2025, Donald Trump is informed by Pam Bondi that his name appears multiple times in the Epstein files. And in June of this year, Dershowitz reiterated his opinion that the age of consent should be lowered and that adult men should be able to have sex with girls as young as 15. So it's kind of weird, but that's the Dershowitz timeline for those of you who have been curious about it. There have been people who have called in. And, you know, as I said, this was reported by Richard Hine, H-I-N-E. He has a newsletter that's published over on ghost.io. And finally, the FCC, the Republican-controlled Federal Communications Commission, has approved the $8 billion acquisition of CBS and Paramount Studios and Comedy Central and a bunch of other media properties by Skydance, which is funded by Larry Ellison, the 11th, I believe, richest man in the world, the founder of Oracle. And now there is talk about Oracle buying TikTok. That would make Larry Ellison even a bigger force in the media than are the two big contenders right now, the two big right-wing contenders, Elon Musk, of course, with Twitter, and the Murdoch family with Fox so-called News and New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, and other properties. But having both CBS, which, by the way, has now said as a condition of this merger approval, that they will be overseeing their content to make sure it doesn't have liberal bias. Oh, my God. But he would have both CBS and TikTok. Make him one very, very powerful man. And it's amazing. I had Jeff Bezos with the Washington Post. You've got that doctor, I'm forgetting his name, who owns the LA Times. Increasingly, we're seeing what exactly happened in Hungary, which is Viktor Orban made sure that all of his oligarch buddies who were his friends, you know, right-wingers, that they ended up owning all of the media of Hungary. And here we have this exact same process is happening here in the United States just a couple of years after Viktor Orban came over and gave a speech at CPAC where he said to Republicans, you guys need to do what I did. You need to acquire the media. And here we are. So what's on your mind? It's Anything Goes weekend. Give us a shout. It's 15 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. Stick around. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Exposing the con in conservative. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back, Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, happy Friday, Tom. Another excellent show today. And I want to give a shout out to Congressman Pocan, who was prompted by that one caller to defend his record for speaking out against the atrocities in Gaza. And I will attest that Congressman Pocan has been outspoken about that ongoing genocide for quite a while.
He has.
And we all need... And you too, and we all need to be, because silence is not an option. That could be a good new tagline for you, but silence is not an option when it comes to humanitarian catastrophes abroad or rising fascism here at home. Having said that, Tom, I do want to challenge the congressman for saying at one point that he hopes the Trump Epstein scandal doesn't distract from the Democrats focusing on the economy. I would say to the contrary, that it's not an either-or situation. Not only can we walk and chew gum at the same time, but in my opinion, the Democrats could use the Epstein-Trump connection and the cover-up to unequivocally, once and for all, place Trump in the company of this depraved power elite. And that he fooled so many of his followers into thinking he was somehow against. So, you know, by continuing to expose him and his lies, we can simultaneously talk about fighting oligarchy, breaking up corporate monopolies, supporting unions, and taking on the cost of living crisis that, as the congressman said, the big ugly bill as well as the crazy tariffs, are going to significantly worsen. So, in other words, in conclusion, we can't just be the party that has the support of kinder and gentler billionaires, which the Kamala Harris campaign kind of settled on by having Mark Cuban by her side in the closing days of the campaign. Because, just as you and Congressman Pocan were lauding Lena Khan today, guys like Mark Cuban wanted her fired. So Kamala wasn't really...
Billionaires got to be billionaires,
Yeah, and Congressman and Kamala wasn't really able to talk about oligarchy. She warned us about the fascism that we're seeing now, but as we know, as you've talked and written about extensively, oligarchy precedes fascism, and it goes hand in hand with it. So, we really do, as Bernie, AOC, and now Zoran Mamdani are doing, we really need to talk about oligarchy and fighting it. And what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's why I wrote the book, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, is that, most people don't even know what oligarchy is in America. I mean, this is where the pathetic, sad state of our civics education and our high school education in the United States. But oligarchy, authoritarianism, all of these different isms and E's, we kind of lack the vocabulary. I mean, the vocabulary is there, but we lack a common understanding of the meaning of the vocabulary in the United States. At the same time that Donald Trump is doing absolutely everything he can as rapidly as he can to consolidate his power and lock down America as an authoritarian state, as a as a neo-Nazi state, frankly. And I'm here to call him out.
Attacking free press, attacking universities, attacking TV shows like 60 Minutes and entertainers like Colbert. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah,
thanks for all you do, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the call. It is 19 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just 60 seconds. Stay with us. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. It's the great revenge. Trump's Orwellian America is taking shape. The key to it was this insane executive order titled Ending the Weaponization of the Federal Government. And basically what it does is it sets up the weaponization of the federal government. It proclaims that the Biden administration was, using the Justice Department to go after Trump people and Republicans, and it does it in a way that basically rationalizes they're doing the same thing. This is a absolute danger to our republic. This executive order and Trump's assertions around it. And you can read all about it. There's a whole op-ed about it titled The Great Revenge, Trump's Orwellian America Takes Shape, over at HartmannReport.com. Get ready for the investigations, the arrests, and the show trials. HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
He didn't come with thunder. He didn't break the glass. He slipped in through the silence, the cracks from decades past. A shadow in the bloodstream, a whisper in the code. He found the doors wide open on a party long road. They'd stripped away the conscience, cut the guardrails down, painted loyalty in poison, wore ambition like a crown. He offered them a mirror. They saw their thirst for might and chose to dim the lanterns instead of light the night. He's the sickness, but
22 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I take a little disagreement with the people who always call up and start acting as if Democrats are part of the problem. I don't believe they are. Not when they're seeing 50 million jobs created versus a Republican million in the last 35 years. I believe in putting the focus on the biggest problem, and that's these fascist Republicans. What they've been doing over the last 40 or 50 years is basically taking control for occupying all of the control points for our economy and politics. So they've got the security apparatus pretty much taking over. They are now polluting our military with their vicious fascist lies. The media bias is on the Republican side. The Fed bias is definitely on the Republican side. And every time Powell says that they don't use politics in their policies, he's telling a blatant, bald-faced lie, and I would tell that to him in his face. The Supreme Court, of course, we all know that that's biased on the Republican side. Corporate America, biased on the Republican side because the Federal Reserve paid them trillions of dollars to make sure that that Republicans get more power. The FCC, the U.S. Postal Service, the voting apparatus machines were handed over to the Republicans in several states so they could study them and find out how can we cheat this way also. And that's on top of all of the voter suppression and everything else that they do. And so, and right now, Donald Trump, that racist piece of garbage, that convicted felon, is attacking diversity. One of the reasons why America is so great is because we have welcomed people from all over the world. People with different ideas, people who have knowledge of how other countries work, so that and we can gain that knowledge. Hitler didn't do that. He killed off his diversity. He sent many of them away. They came to America, and then they helped us win World War II. Donald Trump is such a dumb.
No, I get it. I get it. Larry, you're an astute observer of the economy. I've always been impressed by your command of the facts and the statistics that you have at your fingertips. I'm curious your thoughts on all the reports. I'm seeing them in the Financial Times mostly, that there is a growing concern that Trump's tariff policies, et cetera, so far it looks like mostly the costs have been eaten by corporate America by reducing their profits, the auto industry in particular. But at some point, it's going to show up as significant inflation and maybe even a serious recession. What say you? We've got about 25, 30 seconds here.
Well, right now, the Federal Reserve is flattening out the curve as far as quantitative. If you look at the graph, he's tightening it out. In other words, he's making it so these corporations are get to keep that money the trillions that he gave them. That is actually helping those corporations out. That's why you see the tech companies still making all-time highs.
That's why the stock market's...
While the Dow is still below its highest level when
the dollar is down by 10%.
It's getting close to 20 to 17% right now.
Whoa.
It keeps going. It just keeps getting worse and worse.
Whoa. That's the impoverishment of America. Larry, thank you. It's always great hearing from you. I appreciate all the information you bring to this show. Thank you so much. It's 27 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Weekend. I'll be picking up your calls on the other side of the break here at the bottom of the hour. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for We the People.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with more of your calls.
This is the...
Our book today is Future War, Preparing for the New Global Battlefield by Robert, I believe it's pronounced Latif, L-A-T-I-F-F. This is from the introduction. On a sweltering August day following weeks of heightened tension with Russia over its actions in Ukraine and Syria, and harsh words between the United States and China over actions in the South China Sea, and as workers are preparing to depart the cool of their air-conditioned Manhattan office buildings for the gridlocked highways and subways, several large electric power plants along the East Coast simultaneously experienced dramatic overspeed conditions in their large turbine generators. Plant operators are unable to stop the steam turbines, whose automatic control and data systems have been infected by sophisticated computer malware, and they catastrophically tear themselves apart, cutting power to large segments of the population and industries in the Northeast. Building systems shut down, hospitals switch to emergency generators, trains stop running, traffic lights cease operating, and Wall Street trading comes to a halt. At the same time, 1,100 miles to the south, a massive rocket sits fueled and ready to launch a critical national security satellite when an explosive-laden private aircraft flies at low altitude into the Cape Canaveral launch pad area and, despite repeated warnings, slams into the pressurized fuel tank and solid rocket motors, creating an enormous conflagration. Half a world away, elite commandos equipped with the latest high-technology equipment but unidentifiable as a national army attack U.S. and allied interests near areas of disputed territory. Thus are fired the opening shots of a new war. These hypothetical events represent a radically different style of conflict fought with new tools and against new and unfamiliar enemies. When most people think of war, they imagine soldiers doing battle with other soldiers, employing tanks, artillery, and other weapons. However, in this century, war has morphed into something we can scarcely recognize, and future conflicts will be qualitatively and quantitatively unlike those of the past. They will be fought using innovative and unusual weapons, many of which, because the technologies have both civilian and military uses, will be available to far more people who are far less skilled in their employment. The so-called democratization of technology has diminished the monopoly of advanced countries on the tools of war. 21st century armed conflicts often have no battlefield in the traditional sense. The concept of opposing armies clashing in deadly struggle but moderated by international conventions of behavior seems a thing of the past. In 1999, Chinese colonels Kuo Liang and Wang Shuangshui predicted that soldiers would increasingly be computer hackers, financiers, drug smugglers, and agents of private corporations rather than members of a military, and that their weapons would include not only airplanes, cannons, poison gas bombs, and biochemical agents, but also computer viruses, net browsers, and financial derivative tools. Their predictions were prescient. Yesterday's wars were, like World War II, about saving civilized nations from maniacal dictators, or like the conflicts in Vietnam and Korea, devoted to a clash of ideologies in the attempt to limit the spread of one hegemon over another. They were big affairs involving large military forces and enormous violence. Today's wars are more about cultural and religious hatreds, using violence as a means to change the hearts and minds of people, among whom the killing occurs with more frequency. Tomorrow's wars will be different still, fought largely for political dominance with stealth and cunning, targeting innocents and institutions, heavily dependent on information superiority, and employing strange new weapons. While we have a highly motivated and well-trained and equipped armed forces that will adapt, we are not prepared as a nation to react well to the inevitably messy and ambiguous situations these new conflicts and weapons will present. We still have no clear idea of what constitutes an act of war in cyberspace now, nor of how we might respond to such an act. It is not enough for the military to be prepared. Neither the public nor its decision makers have yet fully comprehended the significance of the changes in the types of conflict and the tools with which they will be fought. Without question, there will be circumstances when decision makers will find it necessary, or at least think it necessary, to send soldiers into classic boots-on-the-ground combat situations. We will continue to project force with our powerful aircraft, our munitions, and our aircraft carrier strike groups. When war is fought in foreign lands, it could well be against other high-tech armies. However, war will increasingly be more personal and often fought closer to home. It will not lend itself to the traditional massive displays of U.S. firepower. It will affect individuals directly, not as some distant conflict we read about in newspapers or watch in the movies or on the internet. Americans will be targeted on U.S. soil, often, as we have seen in San Bernardino and Orlando, by homegrown terrorists. This form of war will be messy and complex, and it will not lend itself to easy, quick, soundbite solutions. It may not even be clear for a while who perpetrated the violence against us. Was it state-sponsored or a random act of terror? Will we unleash massive destruction on foreign countries in retaliation for attacks by terrorists residing on our own soil? If so, to what end and with what consequences? There are always consequences, whether they be the death or capture of our own troops, unnecessary civilian casualties, or the incitement of more violence. The book Future War by Robert Latif.
Help support Progressive Radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it. So what do we call the really, really mind-bogglingly rich? You know, at the founding of the Republic, they were referred to as speculators or moneyed interest or aristocrats. In the years leading up to the Civil War, we called them the cotton lords and the plantation aristocracy. In the late 19th century, they were the robber barons. In the 1930s, FDR called them the economic royalists. But since the Reagan Revolution, we've just called them billionaires. And now, you know, some of them want to call themselves tech bros. Like, that's kind of a good thing, you know, like tech is positive and bros, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg saying we need more masculine energy in American business culture. So we need a new phrase. I would like to suggest the morbidly rich. Morbidly suggests unhealthy. And the vast riches that some of these people have is unhealthy to our democracy, particularly since 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court said that morbidly rich people can buy politicians. And it's unhealthy for them, too. So morbidly rich. There's an op-ed over at HartmannReport.com all about it. Check it out.
They built a god out of silicon, gave it eyes that never sleep, taught it how to mimic voices and how to lie and how to creep. Now it's whispering in the wires, writing stories that ain't true. The truth is dying slowly in the coming AI coup. Once we had a ballot box, now it's just a game of smoke. Deepfakes in the living room, your grandma's feed's gone broke. They're training bots to sway your vote and hide what's real from view. Democracy is dangling in the coming AI coup. Oh, say, can you see? Or are your eyes deceived?
Welcome back, 36 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. TJ in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Hey, TJ, what's on your mind today?
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. How are you?
My pleasure, and what's up?
Well, I'm really concerned about our country and our government. We have way too much politics as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not abiding by our Constitution. If we lose the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, we're done.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to go back and get serious about the Constitution and now this president sitting here with all these executive orders, oligarchy, close to a dictatorship. That's not the way we're supposed to be governed at all.
I agree.
And the system is so rigged. Now, gerrymandering, I'm sure you know what it is, but too many people don't. And right now, Texas and Ohio and some other states, I forget, and these are mainly Republicans, are going to draw these lines to benefit them.
Right. Gerrymandering is where politicians choose their voters. And the way it's supposed to be is the voters choose their politicians. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I'm just saddened when I see, for example, I mean, this is not the way it's supposed to be. Citizens United, I guess, have made this possible. But one guy, Musk, could spend $250 million to get one guy, Trump, elected?
Yeah.
It's not right. And going around to polling places, giving people $1 million to vote for Trump, that's totally rigged.
It's illegal.
And I'm going to try to encourage people to call their representatives, but I'm really concerned. My representative in North Dakota, the House representative, she's holding and has held some phone town halls by phone. I'm not a big fan of it. I think there's nothing like eyeball.
That way they can filter the callers and make sure that they don't get asked uncomfortable questions.
Yeah, well, that to me is a rigged system.
And there's no crowd noise either, so you don't get a sense of what most people think about what they say.
Yeah. Well, right now she's in a different state, Minnesota, for a fundraiser.
Of course she is.
And it's with a bunch of rich people raising money. And for me, a peon to go down there, it would cost me $250 just to be there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right at all.
No, I'm with you, TJ.
So I'll end with this. I try to call my elected representative on a weekly basis and whatever. But I started doing this several years ago, and I'd hear the representative, senator, or representative's aide say, "Okay, TJ, we'll pass your opinion on, we'll pass your comment on." And finally, I woke up. I said, "This is not an opinion or a statement. This is a request." Far different than the other. You know what I'm saying, Tom?
Yeah, I got it. Well, keep it up, TJ.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, good talking to you. David in Clearwater, Florida. Hey, David, thanks for listening to WMNF. What's up?
Hey, I wanted to tell you, if you haven't read, WMNF got cut off with their funds.
Yeah.
And they raised the budget in one day.
Yeah, you're the third person to tell me that, David, and it sounds like really good news. It means they've got a loyal listenership. That's important. So what's on your mind today?
Since we live down here in the land of the nearly dead and the newlywed, I wanted to bring up and answer the question that was raised about alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah, they are doing deportation flights out of there. I mentioned that at the top of the hour.
The state of Florida is paying for that.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Without any compensation. $459 million a year to take care of 1,000 people.
Wow.
They must be flying out first class.
Yeah.
Anyway, due process. At Alligator Alcatraz, the attorneys cannot get to their clients to talk to them.
Yep.
And the inmates that are there, all of these M13 or whatever they call that thing out down in Mexico, 70% of the inmates have no criminal record.
Correct. And of the 30% who do have a, quote, criminal record, the vast majority of them are traffic tickets.
Exactly. So it is nothing more than a prison for people that are brown.
That's correct. That's absolutely right. This is
racism.
The Make America White Again. That's the subtext of Donald Trump's slogans.
All around because my son married a girl from Guyana, and that's she is dark. She's pretty, and I walked my secretary down the aisle 40 years ago to marry an African American. Because her father wouldn't even talk to him, and after they had 2 children, and the children were brought up in the father's home because he worked for me, he had the next wedding at his house. So these are people, these are humans, and we need to be American.
Yeah,
we need just to look at people and not.
With you, I'm absolutely with you.
And,
good on you, David.
Alligator Alcatraz does exactly the opposite.
Yep.
That was a jet port, but then they figured out that the Everglades was a 150-mile wide river, and so they couldn't build a road from there or the rail from there up to Orlando, and that was what the purpose of it was, and it would ruin the rest of the ecology in the south part of the state, which would cut off the water to Miami. So, they left the runway out there.
Yeah,
and people used to go out there and drag race.
Yeah,
and fly, and it was just in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
and now it's the center of the immigration.
Yeah, it's
crisis.
now it's the center of evil. David, thank you. Thanks for all the information, and good on you for the way that you've conducted your life. Thank you. Gordon in Stamford, Connecticut. Hey, Gordon, what's up?
Oh, fine. Tom, the main reason Trump won was propaganda, in particularly lies about the economy, January 6th, and the border.
I agree.
And we need to promote the truth. And we do it by roving billboards. We have roving trucks, trailers, cars, and every progressive should have a billboard in their car stating the truth. And we can flood the red states and maybe concentrate on battleground states. And, you know, this is a 3-year project before the next election.
Well, there are groups doing this, Gordon. There's a couple of these trucks. There's one that's all over the place in D.C. There was one down in Miami. I don't know if they're still doing it. I'm guessing that they're renting them, you know, probably by the day or the week. But
yes.
They have been popping up all over the country. Have you played a role in one?
Not at all. I haven't done anything.
But you're an advocate.
Armchair city, yes.
Yeah.
And we can offer $10,000 reward if they can prove we're not telling the truth. The system, we can combat new lies almost immediately because they've got this whole.
Yeah. No, I think it's really important to get the word out there. It's why I show up for work every day. It's why Louise and I get up at 5 o'clock every morning and put this show together. It's important stuff to help have an informed populace. I'm with you, Gordon, and I love those trucks, those digital trucks. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back. Let's see here. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. How are you doing?
I am fine, thank you. Spilled some tea on my table here, but other than that, I'm good. So what's on your mind?
Okay, first, I would like for Thom Hartmann listeners in Alabama to go out and buy a white hat and write a TH on it so that when we go to rallies, we can find each other.
Okay.
Maybe we ought to do it across the country, you know, so that we can work together and support each other.
Yeah.
But there might be a small crack in Trump support here. The food bank, we have 67 counties. It serves 35. It's located here. They were on TV last night talking about the loss of federal funding and the fact that they now had food for one day to feed 4,000 people where they normally feed 350,000 a month.
Wow.
I had been telling people this was coming, and my son said, "Oh no, you know, he's a Trumper." He says, "No, they're not taking food away from people." And he was sitting here watching it, and I was watching his face. But no, I have a friend in D.C. who has been listening to stuff and paying attention to J.D. Vance and his trips to Murdoch. And they are saying that Trump is he's worse off than they're letting anybody know.
Yeah, I've heard those rumors. Physically, you mean?
Yes, and that we may have Vance as president, which really scares me. And it scares me about who would he have for vice president.
Well, and Vance just gave this speech where he basically said that, real Americans are white people, that only the descendants of the Mayflower, et cetera, I think it was a neo-Nazi speech. It was amazing.
Yeah,
it got
and
so
that
little
scares
press.
the stew out of me.
Yeah.
And his wife is not a white woman either. And so what does she think?
I know. She's got to be just horrified. I'm so proud of her for.
Think about the Spanish settlements in Texas and New Mexico in the early 1500s. The white people weren't here first, and Native Americans were here before that. And so they can take it and stick it, so far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and Usha Vance is still refusing to convert to Christianity, and she's refusing to eat meat. And I am really impressed by that. I mean, you know, she told us this at the Republican National Convention, that she's still Hindu and she's still a vegetarian. And, you know, this has got to be causing no end of grief for J.D. Vance.
Yeah, well, what I said, though, is that from my contact in D.C. is that he is much worse off and that it's interfering with his days of what he's supposed to do and where he should be and things like that.
Yeah, he hasn't been playing golf a lot lately.
No, And there's some type of serious digestive disorder, and his blood pressure is bad, and his heart is involved.
Yeah.
So
well,
I don't know
his
how
swollen
long.
ankles look like heart failure.
Yeah, I know, because I've been a caregiver since I was 10 years old when my grandmother's doctor grabbed me and made me do this and that and the other in the hospital. And so I've been around elders all my life, taking care of them. And I look at him and I see exactly what's wrong with him.
Yeah, cardiac insufficiency.
Yes, and my older sister has the same problem.
Yeah.
And she's been wearing compressive socks for 10 years, but I don't think you can't eat greasy French fries every day and live.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Norma, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Take
the
care,
call.
Tom.
Stay healthy. and,
Yeah.
Yeah, I love your idea for the hats. Thank you. It's 49 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. You know, corporate raiders, when they acquire a company, basically strip it down. They take everything of value out of it, put it in their own pockets, leave just a husk of a company. I watched, Bain Capital do this with Clear Channel. In fact, they just ran it into bankruptcy, and they run off with all the cash. Well, that's what Donald Trump is doing to America right now. He's basically behaving like a corporate raider, taking, all the assets of this company and handing as many of them as possible off to billionaires and shutting down programs that benefit average working class people. This is, an all billionaire cabinet or largely billionaire cabinet with a billionaire president, and they're dancing to the tune of the billionaires. It shouldn't surprise us, I suppose, but there's a whole article about it over in my Daily Take entitled Trump's Hostile Takeover of America, the Corporate Raiders' Final Heist, over at HartmanReport.com. Check it out.
When I was just a kid.
Paul in Ellsbury, Missouri. Hey, Paul, what's up?
I was wondering, do you know of a publication, 972 magazine?
I do not.
Okay, well, Democracy Now! Had on Monday, they had interviewing the guy who does the write-up. I don't know if it's on the computer, on paper or what. But anyhow, it was a story about Palestinians going back to their bombed-out homes and to get either clothing or maybe money that was in the house when it was bombed or something. And so the Israelis have drones that when they see them, they bomb them with hand grenades. And they say it doesn't matter if they don't have any weapons or not. They're, we can kill them no matter what.
Wow. Yeah, it's barbaric what's going on over there. It's just barbaric.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at famine. I mean, this is barbaric.
Well, even this morning they had on the BBC Verify and Democracy Now! About the Palestinians waiting in line for food, and there'll be a group of American people that are helping distribute the food. They'll yell out for the Israelis to shoot into the crowd.
Yeah, it's
American
contractors.
Who are they? Are they Blackwater people or what?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a terrible situation. It really and truly is. Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, and he deserves to be in prison for the rest of his life, in my opinion. Paul, thank you for the
Well, they
call.
were interviewing a doctor also that he said that they're having the snipers shoot the kids, And like on certain days, I guess they have a sniper that's really good on shooting them in a certain location.
Yeah, they shoot the children. They've shot over 100 journalists and killed them. They've murdered aid workers. The World Kitchen people. They've murdered doctors. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Paul, thank you for the call. CJ in Stoughton, Wisconsin. Hey, CJ, what's up?
Well, thank you for taking my call again, Tom. You and I, we don't see eye to eye, but you are genuine enough to take my call, and I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, you spoke earlier about the difference between what President Trump is. He's not a career politician. And thank God, because the career politicians put this country where they are at today. And
you
I mean
the strongest
on both
country in the
sides
world,
of
the beacon of liberty for the world, prior to the Trump administration, of course. The strongest economy in the world. Joe Biden had literally the strongest economy in the world. Is that what you're talking about? The professional
I'm
politicians,
talking about what we listened to you and your party tell us for 2.5 years the border was secure. Biden averaged 6,000 undocumented a day.
That were being turned back. Yeah.
And can I state the facts? Because that's what frustrates me is that you already claim that Tulsi Gabbard, her information, it's going to speak the truth. The truth cometh that the Obama administration and their national security administration took this country down a treasonous conspiracy.
What she's claiming is that hang on just a second, CJ. What Kristi Noem is claiming is that when Marco Rubio's Senate Intelligence Committee wrote a report that he signed that said that in 2016 the Russians did try to influence the election by targeting people on Facebook and other social media and through other means as well. She's coming out and saying, well, they never actually tried to hack the election.
Change the vote. That's what he's saying.
She is saying, no, CJ, listen to this. She is lying to you. She is.
The facts.
No. The fact is, as Marco Rubio laid out, and let me just finish a sentence. I'll let you finish your sentences. Marco Rubio laid this out. The Russians helped Donald Trump get elected in 2016. All of our intelligence agencies agreed on that. The Republicans in the Senate signed off on that. So Tulsi Gabbard comes along and says, okay, we're going to try and pretend that never happened, and we're going to try to pretend that Obama was claiming that the Russians had hacked the voting machines. Obama never made that claim. The Senate never made that claim. Our intelligence agencies never made that claim. So she comes out and she says, so Obama says they tried to hack the voting machines and they didn't. There's no evidence of that, which is true. There is no evidence of that because they didn't. And therefore, Obama committed treason because he lied to us about it when he never said that. She's lying to you, CJ. She's playing you for a sucker. All yours now.
Can I finish my sentence? The Obama administration lied to the FISA court about all this information. It's not about whether Russia spied. It's about the manufactured weaponization that the Obama, Brennan, and the whole staff used against Trump. He knew the information was a lie, and they continued forward with it. And the truth will be told that Obama, the epitome for your Democrat Party, what they claimed Trump did. He lied to every American voter. Sadly,
about what?
He did.
What's the lie?
About what?
Yeah, what's the lie?
Information that the Russian collusion,
come on. I'm believing Marco Rubio here that the Russians really did want, and Vladimir Putin, who said in a news conference in the 2016 election, because we wanted Trump in the White House. He said that. Donald Trump was standing right next to him when he did it. CJ, I got to run. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. Hey, thanks for being with us. Oh, hey, special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jay LeBlanc, Jeremy Peterson, Connor Arroyo, Carna Verde, Martha Salinas, Mateo Robertson, Diane Russell, and Ruben Michaels. Thank you for being with us. Get out there, get active, tag you're it. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll catch up with you on Tuesday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today is Future War, Preparing for the New Global Battlefield by Robert, I believe it's pronounced Latif, L-A-T-I-F-F. This is from the introduction. On a sweltering August day following weeks of heightened tension with Russia over its actions in Ukraine and Syria, and harsh words between the United States and China over actions in the South China Sea, and as workers are preparing to depart the cool of their air-conditioned Manhattan office buildings for the gridlocked highways and subways, several large electric power plants along the East Coast simultaneously experienced dramatic overspeed conditions in their large turbine generators. Plant operators are unable to stop the steam turbines, whose automatic control and data systems have been infected by sophisticated computer malware, and they catastrophically tear themselves apart, cutting power to large segments of the population and industries in the Northeast. Building systems shut down, hospitals switch to emergency generators, trains stop running, traffic lights cease operating, and Wall Street trading comes to a halt. At the same time, 1,100 miles to the south, a massive rocket sits fueled and ready to launch a critical national security satellite when an explosive-laden private aircraft flies at low altitude into the Cape Canaveral launch pad area and, despite repeated warnings, slams into the pressurized fuel tank and solid rocket motors, creating an enormous. Half a world away, elite commandos equipped with the latest high-technology equipment but unidentifiable as a national army attack U.S. and allied interests near areas of disputed territory. Thus are fired the opening shots of a new war. These hypothetical events represent a radically different style of conflict fought with new tools and against new and unfamiliar enemies. When most people think of war, they imagine soldiers doing battle with other soldiers, employing tanks, artillery, and other recognizable weapons. However, in this century, war has morphed into something we can scarcely recognize, and future conflicts will be qualitatively and quantitatively unlike those of the past. It will be fought using innovative and unusual weapons, many of which, because the technologies have both civilian and military uses, will be available to far more people who are far less skilled in their employment. The so-called democratization of technology has diminished the monopoly of advanced countries on the tools of war. 21st century armed conflicts often have no battlefield in the traditional sense. The concept of opposing armies clashing in deadly struggle but moderated by international conventions of behavior seems a thing of the past. In 1999, Chinese colonels Kuo Liang and Wang Shuangshui predicted that soldiers would increasingly be computer hackers, financiers, drug smugglers, and agents of private corporations rather than members of a military, and that their weapons would include not only airplanes, cannons, poison gas bombs, and biochemical agents, but also computer viruses, net browsers, and financial derivative tools. Their predictions were prescient. Yesterday's wars were, like World War II, about saving civilized nations from maniacal dictators, or like the conflicts in Vietnam and Korea, devoted to a clash of ideologies in the attempt to limit the spread of one hegemon over another. They were big affairs involving large military forces and enormous violence. Today's wars are more about cultural and religious hatreds, using violence as a means to change the hearts and minds of people, among whom the killing occurs with more frequency. Tomorrow's wars will be different still, fought largely for political dominance with stealth and cunning, targeting innocents and institutions, heavily dependent on information superiority, and employing strange new weapons. While we have a highly motivated and well-trained and equipped armed forces that will adapt, we are not prepared as a nation to react well to the inevitably messy and ambiguous situations these new conflicts and weapons will present. We still have no clear idea of what constitutes an act of war in cyberspace now, nor of how we might respond to such an act. Not enough for the military to be prepared. Neither the public nor its decision makers have yet fully comprehended the significance of the changes in the types of conflict and the tools with which they will be fought. Without question, there will be circumstances when decision makers will find it necessary, or at least think it necessary, to send soldiers into classic boots-on-the-ground combat situations. We will continue to project force with our powerful aircraft, our munitions, and our aircraft carrier strike groups. When war is fought in foreign lands, it could well be against other high-tech armies. However, war will increasingly be more personal and often fought closer to home. It will not lend itself to the traditional massive displays of U.S. firepower. It will affect individuals directly, not as some distant conflict we read about in newspapers or watch in the movies or on the internet. Americans will be targeted on U.S. soil, often, as we have seen in San Bernardino and Orlando, by homegrown terrorists. This form of war will be messy and complex, and it will not lend itself to easy, quick, soundbite solutions. It may not even be clear for a while who perpetrated the violence against us. Was it state-sponsored or a random act of terror? Will destruction on foreign countries in retaliation for attacks by terrorists residing on our own soil? If so, to what end and with what consequences? There are always consequences, whether they be the death or capture of our own troops, unnecessary civilian casualties, or the incitement of more violence. The book Future War by Robert Latif.